Hey everyone. Welcome back for the second part of What If Naruto Was a Genius of Hard Work? As always, huge thanks to all of my Patreons. Making these videos would be impossible without you guys' support, especially with all the restrictions YouTube places on my type of content. As always, the full story is already out over there for you guys along with about 50 other different stories you can enjoy. Also, feel free to send me any messages over there if you have any questions or even if you just want to chat. Link to all of that will be in the description. Anyways, everyone, enjoy the video. Chapter 4, The Road and the Rivalry. The air at the main gate of Konoha was thick with the heavy silence of departure. It was a scene that had played out countless times throughout the village's history, shinobi leaving the familiar comfort of home for the uncertainty of the road. But this departure felt different. It was not a mission with a defined end, it was the beginning of an exile, a strategic retreat, a forging of new weapons in a secret, mobile fire. Naruto stood tall, his new Jonin vest feeling less awkward and more like a second skin. Beside him, Sasuke was a study in coiled intensity, his gaze fixed on the path ahead, his hands shoved in his pockets to conceal the restless energy thrumming through him. Before them stood Jiraiya, his usual jovial expression replaced by the grim focus of a commander embarking on a campaign deep in enemy territory. Their farewell party was small but significant. Kakashi leaned against the gatepost, his single visible eye conveying a universe of pride, concern, and trust. Sakura stood beside him, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She had spent the last week absorbing every medical text she could find, preparing herself to be the rock that Team 7 would need when its wandering pillars returned. "You'd better not slack off while we're gone," Naruto said to her, a grin tugging at his lips. "When we get back, we'll need the best medic in the world watching our backs." "I will be," Sakura replied, her voice firm, her eyes shining with a resolve that matched their own. She looked from Naruto to Sasuke, a silent promise passing between the three of them. They were still a team, separated only by distance. Sasuke simply nodded at Kakashi, a gesture of respect that spoke volumes more than words ever could. It was an acknowledgement of everything his teacher had done, and a silent vow to not let that training go to waste. "All right, brats," Jiraiya grunted, hoisting his massive scroll onto his back. "The world is big, and the Akatsuki are busy. Let's not keep them waiting." With a final look back at the village gates, the trio turned and walked away, their three figures shrinking into the distance, leaving Konoha under the watchful eye of its new Hokage and the quiet strength of the comrades they left behind. The first week on the road was a lesson in a new kind of silence. The dynamic was a triangle of intense, unspoken energies. Jiraiya, foregoing his usual research, was all business, his senses constantly extended, his mind processing reports from his vast spy network. Naruto, free from the confines of the village, maintained a constant, low-level deployment of 100 clones, a stealthy reconnaissance network that scouted their path for miles in every direction, their feedback a quiet, steady stream of information in the back of his mind. Sasuke was the most changed. The simmering rage and desperation that had defined him since his spar with Naruto had been channeled into a cold, sharp focus. He was an observer, his 3 Tomoe Sharingan now active almost constantly. He wasn't just watching the road, he was deconstructing it. He analyzed the flight patterns of birds, the subtle shifts in the wind, the chakra signatures of passing travelers. But most of all, he watched Naruto. He watched how Naruto moved, how he breathed, how he seemed to process information from unseen sources. He was studying his rival with the intensity of a scholar trying to decipher a sacred, powerful text. Their first destination was a bustling port town in the Land of Fire's eastern peninsula, a place called Shiosai, the tide's roar. It was a chaotic nexus of trade and travel, a city of salt-laced air, winding streets, and the constant clamor of merchants and sailors from a dozen different lands. "We're here for 2 reasons, Jiraiya announced as they checked into a nondescript inn overlooking the harbor. "First, my sources say a low-level Akatsuki informant was recently active in this area. We're going to see what he was sniffing around for. Second," he looked at them both, his expression hardening, "your real training begins now. The controlled environment of Konoha is a crutch. Out here, there are no safety nets." He led them not to a training ground, but to the storm-battered sea cliffs outside the town. A fierce gale was blowing in from the ocean, whipping the waves into a churning frenzy and sending sheets of rain lashing against the rocks. "Naruto," Jiraiya yelled over the roar of the wind. "Your chakra control is precise, but it's untested. You can make a Rasengan, but can you maintain it under pressure? Your task is to stand on the surface of that water and hold a stable Rasengan for 1 hour. The storm will test your balance, the waves will test your focus, and the salt spray will test your concentration. Fail, and the ocean will swallow you." He then turned to Sasuke. Sasuke, your Sharingan can see through genjutsu, but you are still susceptible to illusions that target the other senses. Sound, touch, even smell. Itachi is a master of these. I will now create an illusion. It will not be a visual one. It will be a storm within the storm, a phantom world of sound and pressure. Your task is to break it. You cannot use brute force. You must find the seam, the single, subtle flaw in the illusion, and unravel it with your own chakra. The training was a new kind of hell. Naruto, standing on the churning waves, felt like a leaf in a hurricane. Every muscle in his body screamed as he constantly adjusted his chakra output to match the violent, unpredictable sea. Forming the Rasengan was easy, maintaining its perfect, spherical shape while being battered by wind and water was a monumental test of will. The sphere would flicker, warp, and dissipate, forcing him to start again, his arms aching, his chakra draining. Sasuke, meanwhile, was trapped in a silent, personal nightmare. Jiraiya's genjutsu was a masterpiece of subtlety. He saw the same storm as Naruto, but he felt the pressure of the air change, heard the phantom whispers of his past in the roar of the wind, and felt the chilling touch of an unseen enemy against his skin. His Sharingan was useless against it. He was forced to turn his focus inward, to use his senses not to see the world, but to feel the flow of his own chakra, to detect the alien energy of the genjutsu that had infected his senses. For hours they toiled, battered by the real storm and their own personal ones. Finally, as dusk began to fall, something shifted. Sasuke, in a moment of desperate clarity, isolated the source of the genjutsu, a single, almost imperceptible thread of Jiraiya's chakra that had anchored itself to his auditory nerve. With a surge of his own chakra, he severed the connection, and the phantom whispers and chilling touches vanished, leaving only the clean, cold reality of the storm. As his mind cleared, a new, fierce clarity bloomed in his eyes. The third tomoe in each of his Sharingan spun into existence, a testament to his victory over the intangible. At the same moment, Naruto, his body screaming in protest, finally achieved a state of perfect equilibrium. He stood on the waves, his feet anchored by a flawless flow of chakra, and in his hand, a perfect, stable Rasengan hummed with contained power, utterly indifferent to the raging storm around it. They collapsed on the cliffs, exhausted but victorious. Not bad, brats, Jiraiya said, a rare, genuine smile on his face. Not bad at all. Later that night, as they ate a quiet meal in the inn, Naruto's clones delivered their report. They had found the Akatsuki informant's trail. He hadn't been investigating a person or a place. He had been buying up old nautical charts, specifically ones detailing a series of remote, uninhabited islands far to the east, in the uncharted waters between the land of fire and the land of water. Hideouts, Sasuke surmised, his new 3 tomoe Sharingan making connections with startling speed. They're establishing a network of bases, far from the reach of the major villages. Exactly, Jiraiya said, his expression grim. And that's where we're going next. He laid a sea chart on the table. We're chartering a boat. Our hunt for the Akatsuki begins in earnest tomorrow. Naruto and Sasuke looked at each other across the table. The exhaustion was still there, but so was a new, shared understanding. The rivalry hadn't vanished. It had evolved. It was no longer a race to see who was stronger, but a partnership to see how strong they could become together. They were two sides of the same coin, a hurricane of power and a storm of precision, and they were about to be unleashed upon a world that had no idea what was coming. The unforgiving sea. The boat was a testament to function over form. A single-masted fishing trawler named the Sea Serpent, its hull scarred by years of battling the ocean, its deck smelling perpetually of salt and brine. The captain was a man carved from the same weathered timber, a grizzled old sailor named Kido with a face like a sea chart and hands as tough as barnacles. He had taken Jiraiya's money with a skeptical grunt, his gaze lingering on the two boys with an air of profound unimpressiveness. To a man who had faced down krakens and typhoons, 3 shinobi were just more mouths to feed. As the port town of Shiosai shrank into a speck on the horizon, the vast, unforgiving expanse of the open ocean became their new training ground. The solid earth was gone, replaced by a constantly shifting deck and the rhythmic groan of the ship's timbers. A shinobi who has only mastered land is only half a shinobi, Jiraiya announced on their second day at sea, the sky a brilliant, cloudless blue. The world is 70% water. To ignore it is to surrender the largest battlefield on the planet. He set their new regimen. It was, as always, tailored to their unique abilities and the harsh realities of their new environment. Sasuke, Jiraiya began, pointing to a series of targets they had set up on floating buoys trailing the ship. Your fire style is potent, but out here, it is at a fundamental disadvantage. The humidity, the salt in the air, it all works to dampen your flames. Your task is to overcome that. You will practice your fire jutsu until you can produce a flame so hot, so intense, that it is unaffected by the ocean itself. You will learn to turn a drop of water into steam before it can touch your fire. Sasuke nodded, his 3 Tomoe Sharingan already analyzing the moisture content of the air, calculating the additional chakra needed. It was a problem of pure power and control, a challenge he relished. Naruto, Jiraiya's tone shifted. You have mastered the Rasengan, a perfect application of shape manipulation. You have begun to apply your wind nature to it. Now, you will take the next logical step, large-scale environmental manipulation. He gestured to the vast, empty ocean around them. Your wind can affect water. I want you to create a whirlpool. Not with a jutsu, but by applying the principles of the Rasengan to the sea itself. You will use your wind to create a rotation, a vortex, powerful enough to disrupt the current. It is a test of stamina, focus, and macro-level chakra control on a scale you have never attempted. The task was monumental. Naruto began by sending 100 clones into the water. They spread out, forming a massive circle, and began to run on the surface, their combined movement creating a slight, initial current. Naruto Prime stood on the ship's mast, his eyes closed, his senses extended through his clones. He had to feel the water, understand its flow, its weight, its resistance. He then began to feed his wind chakra into the water through the clones, trying to create the spin, the vortex. For days, the results were negligible. He would create little more than a massive, frothy bubble bath, his efforts dissipating uselessly into the vastness of the sea. The chakra drain was immense, leaving him collapsed on the deck in exhaustion each evening, while Sasuke, his throat raw and his hands blistered, managed to produce fireballs that hissed and steamed but ultimately succumbed to the ocean spray. Their rivalry found a new rhythm. Sasuke, with his perfected Sharingan, could see the flow of Naruto's wind chakra in the water. He could see the flaws in the rotation, the points where the energy was dispersing. During their breaks, he would offer curt, clinical advice. Your clones on the western arc are out of sync. It's creating a drag that collapses the vortex. In turn, Naruto, through the sheer trial and error of his clones, developed an intuitive understanding of heat and pressure dynamics. You're trying to overpower the humidity, he told Sasuke one evening. Don't use it. Superheat the air in front of your flame. Create a pocket of dry, empty space for your fire to ignite in. It was a partnership forged in mutual frustration and a shared, burning desire for improvement. They were no longer just competing, they were collaborating, their unique skill sets providing insights the other lacked. The breakthrough came a week into their voyage. Sasuke, incorporating Naruto's advice, finally unleashed a dragon fire jutsu that was blindingly white-hot. The flame struck a buoy 100 yards away, and the ocean around it flash-boiled, erupting in a massive cloud of steam. He had done it. He had conquered the environment. Inspired by his rival's success, Naruto redoubled his efforts. He dismissed the clones from the water and stood on the surface himself. He took a deep breath, sinking into the mental state he'd achieved during the storm training. He didn't try to force the water to move. He asked it to. He extended his chakra, not as a battering ram, but as a gentle, guiding hand. He introduced his wind, not as a blade, but as a current, a whisper that suggested a new direction. Slowly, tentatively, the ocean responded. The water around him began to spin. It started small, a gentle swirl, but as Naruto poured more chakra into it, feeding the rotation, it grew. The swirl became a vortex, the vortex became a whirlpool. Within minutes, a churning, roaring maelstrom, 50 feet wide, was spinning beside the sea serpent, its power so great it began to pull the ship off course. Naruto. That's enough, Jiraiya yelled, his face a mixture of pride and alarm. Naruto released his control, and the whirlpool slowly subsided, the ocean returning to its calm, rhythmic swell. He collapsed onto the surface of the water, completely drained but grinning in triumph. That night, Captain Kaido looked at the two boys with a new expression. It wasn't quite respect, but the disdain was gone, replaced by the wary acknowledgement one gives to a sleeping typhoon. 2 weeks into their journey, they reached the coordinates from the informant's charts. It was an archipelago of jagged, volcanic islands shrouded in a perpetual, unnatural mist. The place felt ancient and wrong, a scar on the face of the ocean. No ships go here, Kaido grunted, his hand resting on the ship's wheel. They call it the graveyard of ships. The currents are treacherous, and the rocks are like razors. It's a place where things go to be forgotten. It's perfect for a hideout, Jiraiya murmured. Naruto deployed 100 clones, their task to perform a comprehensive stealth reconnaissance of the main island. They moved like ghosts through the mist-shrouded jungle, their senses on high alert. The feedback that came back was unsettling. There was no Akatsuki base. No active settlement at all. What they found was a ruin. A series of crumbling, moss-covered buildings surrounding a central, fortified laboratory. The architecture was utilitarian and grim, and the entire complex was surrounded by a series of decaying, but still potent, ceiling arrays. But it was the sigil carved above the main laboratory door that made Naruto's blood run cold. It was a snake, coiled around a sound symbol. Jiraiya, Naruto said, his voice low as he relayed the information. It's not Akatsuki. It's one of Orochimaru's old labs. The trio went ashore, moving cautiously through the oppressive silence of the island. The air was heavy, stagnant, and carried the faint, metallic scent of old blood and chemicals. They found the lab just as the clones had described it. Sasuke's Sharingan scanned the seals on the door. They're complex. Designed to contain something, not just keep people out. Jiraiya examined the decaying paper talismans. And they've been tampered with. Recently. Someone was here, and they were trying to get in. With a combined effort, they bypassed the seals and forced the heavy stone door open. The air that billowed out was stale and smelled of death and ozone. The laboratory within was a scene of clinical horror. Cages lined the walls, some still containing the skeletal remains of unidentifiable creatures. Vials of strange, colored liquids lay smashed on the floor. But it was the central chamber that drew their attention. In the middle of the room was a massive, shattered glass containment tube, large enough to hold a man. Wires and pipes snaked from it to a series of complex machines that were now dark and silent. And on the floor, scattered around the tube, were scraps of charred black cloth, adorned with a faint, almost invisible pattern of red clouds. The Akatsuki were here, Sasuke stated, his voice a low growl. They weren't building a base. They were salvaging something. Naruto knelt, examining the floor. His eyes caught something else. A single, long strand of red hair lay near the base of the shattered tube. He picked it up, his mind racing. He knew that hair. He had seen it before, in the files his clones had pulled on his own history. Jiraiya, Naruto said, his voice grim as he held up the strand of hair. This is Uzumaki hair. Jiraiya's eyes widened in shock and dawning horror. An abandoned Orochimaru lab. A containment tube. Akatsuki activity. And the DNA of Naruto's own clan. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture that was both terrifying and deeply personal. Their hunt for the Akatsuki had just stumbled upon a ghost from the past, a secret that could unravel everything they thought they knew about Orochimaru, the Uzumaki clan, and the true, horrifying nature of the Akatsuki's goals. The silence in the laboratory was a heavy, suffocating thing, thick with the ghosts of past atrocities. The single strand of vibrant red hair in Naruto's hand seemed to absorb all the light in the room, a stark, living testament to the cold, clinical horror surrounding them. Jiraiya took the strand of hair from Naruto, his expression unreadable, but his chakra flared with a sudden, murderous intensity that made the air crackle. He rolled the hair between his thumb and forefinger, his eyes distant, connecting decades of scattered intelligence reports, whispers of his former teammates' obsessions, and the grim reality before them. It's not just Uzumaki hair, Jiraiya said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. It's from a specific bloodline. The royal line of Uzushigakure. He looked at the shattered containment tube, at the faded seals on the wall, and the pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't just an experiment, he explained, his voice grim. This was a cloning and extraction facility. After the fall of the Land of Whirlpools, Orochimaru must have captured one of the few surviving members of the Uzumaki royal family. Someone with a high concentration of the clan's vitality and an innate talent for Fuinjutsu. Sasuke's Sharingan spun, absorbing every detail, his mind processing the strategic implications. He wasn't just studying them. He was trying to replicate their abilities. To create a perfect vessel. Worse, Jiraiya corrected him. He was trying to understand the mechanics of the Jinchuriki seal. The Uzumaki were the masters of sealing jutsu. They were the only ones who could safely contain the tailed beasts. Kushina. Naruto's mother. Her chakra was the key to maintaining the nine-tailed seal. Orochimaru wasn't just trying to create a strong body, he was trying to reverse engineer the perfect cage, so he could learn how to build his own ki. The full weight of the revelation landed on Naruto. This wasn't just about a faceless clan member. This was about his mother. Orochimaru had desecrated the legacy of his family, using one of his own kin as a lab rat to unlock the secrets of the seal that now resided on his own stomach. The cold, analytical detachment he usually employed shattered, replaced by a pure, focused rage that was terrifying in its stillness. His chakra, For a moment, flickered with the malevolent red of the nine tails, a reflection of the fury now boiling within him. And the Akatsuki? Naruto asked, his voice dangerously quiet. They weren't here for a person, Jiraiya said, gesturing to the charred scraps of their cloaks. The subject is long gone, either dead from the experiments or moved to another facility. No, the Akatsuki were here for the data. All of Orochimaru's research on the Uzumaki life force, on Jinchuriki seals, on Naruto's own genetic makeup. They have it now. They're not just hunting you anymore, kid. They're studying your schematics. They're looking for a weakness. The rivalry between Naruto and Sasuke, the Sanin's training, the hunt for Tsunade, it all suddenly felt like children's games. They had been playing checkers while their true enemies were engaged in a multidimensional game of chess, and they had just stumbled upon one of their opponent's hidden notebooks. Sasuke looked at Naruto, and for the first time, he saw not a rival, but a mirror. The Uchiha hunted for their eyes. The Uzumaki hunted for their vitality and seals. Their clans, two of the most powerful in history, reduced to a collection of desirable traits for monsters to harvest. The shared nature of their cursed legacies forged a bond between them stronger than any rivalry. What was his name? Naruto asked, his voice barely a whisper as he looked at the empty containment tube. The person they kept here. My family. Jiraiya was silent for a long moment. I don't know, he admitted, the failure heavy in his voice. Orochimaru was always meticulous about hiding the identities of his test subjects. But he was a hero, Naruto. Whoever he was, he endured this hell, and in doing so, he denied Orochimaru the final key to his research. His resilience, his sacrifice. It bought the world time. It bought you time. Naruto closed his eyes, committing the scene to memory. This lab was no longer just a place of horror. It was a memorial. A testament to the quiet, unseen battles fought by his clan. His mission was no longer just about protecting himself or his friends. It was about avenging the ghosts of Uzushio. We need to get this information back to Tsunade, Sasuke said, his voice all business, pulling them back to the present. This changes everything. The Akatsuki's intelligence advantage is a critical threat. The kid's right, Jiraiya agreed, his focus returning. Our training trip just became an active counterintelligence mission. We're no longer just preparing for a storm, we're in the middle of it. They left the lab, sealing it behind them with a complex Fuinjutsu array of Jiraiya's own design, a final ward to protect the sanctity of the forgotten Uzumaki's tomb. They returned to the Sea Serpent, the mood on the ship as dark and turbulent as the churning gray sea around them. Captain Kaido took one look at their grim faces and knew better than to ask questions. He simply turned the ship's wheel, pointing the bow back towards the mainland. The journey back was not filled with training. It was filled with planning. The three of them sat around the sea chart in the captain's cabin, which now served as their war room. Naruto's clones were no longer just scouting, they were actively hunting, seeking out Jiraiya's network of spies, relaying the new intelligence, and trying to find any trace of the Akatsuki's movements. Sasuke, his Sharingan burning, memorized every detail of the lab's layout, every scrap of information, preparing a perfect report for the Hokage. The rivalry had been reforged. It was no longer a simple competition. Naruto's power was the shield, the overwhelming force that could protect them. Sasuke's precision was the spear, the analytical mind that could find the enemy's weakness. And Jiraiya was the spymaster, the veteran commander guiding his two ultimate weapons. As the coastline of the Land of Fire finally appeared on the horizon, Naruto stood on the bow of the ship, the sea spray cool on his face. The ocean no longer felt like a training ground. It felt like a border. Behind him was the past, a legacy of secrets and sacrifice. Ahead of him was the future, a war fought in the shadows against an enemy that knew his name, his blood, and the secrets of the demon sealed within him. The training trip was over. The war had just begun. The port city of Nagare, on the western coast of the continent, was a place that thrived on secrets. Nestled on the border of the volatile land of grass, it was a wretched hive of smugglers, mercenaries, and rogue shinobi, all peddling information and services in the city's smoky tea houses and shadowy back alleys. The air, thick with the smell of exotic spices and damp rot, was a perfect cloak for Task Force Hurricane. They arrived not as Konoha shinobi, but as ghosts. Jiraiya had procured 3 sets of traveler's clothes, simple, durable, and utterly unremarkable. They sold the Sea Serpent to a discreet broker, erasing the last trace of their journey from the Land of Fire. To the world, Jiraiya and his 2 promising students had vanished. Their new base of operations was a small, soundproofed room above a quiet noodle shop, the owner a long-dormant agent in Jiraiya's vast network. The room became their command center. From this point on, we do not exist, Jiraiya instructed, his voice low as he unrolled a map of the land of grass. We do not use our names. We do not wear our headbands. We are shadows, and shadows do not draw attention. The nature of their training shifted from power to lethality. Jiraiya drilled them relentlessly in the arts of silent killing, chakra suppression, and counter-interrogation. He taught Sasuke how to use his Sharingan not just to copy jutsu, but to implant subtle genjutsu suggestions during a conversation, a form of psychic infiltration. He taught Naruto how to use his wind chakra to alter the sound of his own footsteps, to create silent, cutting attacks that left no trace, and to use his clones as a network of invisible, whispering spies. Naruto's clone deployment became a masterpiece of subterfuge. They were no longer just scouts. They were deep cover agents. Clones transformed into weary merchants, gossiping barmaids, and desperate beggars, melting into the city's underbelly. They didn't ask questions, they listened. They gathered data on the local power structures, the flow of illegal goods, and, most importantly, any whispers of strange activity, of missing people, of scientific curiosities. The information flowed back to Naruto Prime in a constant, silent stream, which he then relayed to Jiraiya and Sasuke. Sasuke, in turn, became their analyst. He would take the raw data from Naruto's clones and, with the enhanced perception of his 3 Tomoe Sharingan, find the patterns, the connections, the single thread that could lead them to their next target. He sat for hours in their small room, a map spread before him, cross-referencing Naruto's reports with Jiraiya's intelligence, his mind a whirlwind of deduction. The rivalry between the two boys had evolved into a symbiotic intelligence-gathering machine. Naruto was the net, spread across the entire country, and Sasuke was the fisherman, pulling the single, valuable catch from the chaotic sea of information. After 2 weeks of silent, patient work, they found a thread. It was a rumor, dismissed by most as local superstition. A small, isolated village deep in the forests of the land of grass, called Kusamura, was said to be afflicted with a whispering sickness. Travelers who passed through spoke of a place of profound silence, where the villagers moved like ghosts, their eyes vacant, their life force seemingly drained away. People had started disappearing. Not violently, but quietly, fading away as if they had never been. Cellular decay, Sasuke stated, his finger tracing a line on the map from Nagare to the remote village. The symptoms matched the theoretical side effects of some of Orochimaru's early experiments in forced cell regeneration. The body's energy is consumed to power the process, but without a perfect host, the result is a slow, quiet death. It's a lab, Naruto said, his voice cold. He used the villagers as test subjects, and the sickness is the result of his failures. And the disappearances? Jiraiya prompted. The successes, Naruto finished, a grim understanding dawning on his face. The ones who survived the process were taken for further study. It was their first solid lead. A breadcrumb on the serpent's trail. The journey to Kusamura was a tense, silent trek through dense, primordial forests. They moved like wraiths, their chakra suppressed, their senses on high alert. The closer they got to the village, the quieter the forest became. The birds stopped singing. The insects fell silent. It was as if the land itself was holding its breath. They arrived at the village outskirts at dusk. Kusamura was nestled in a deep valley, shrouded in a low-lying mist. There were no lights in the windows, no smoke from the chimneys. The silence was absolute, unnatural, and deeply unsettling. "This feels wrong," Sasuke whispered, his Sharingan cutting through the gloom. "There are people in there. Dozens of them. But their chakra. It's faint, sluggish. Like dying embers." "We go in after dark," Jiraiya commanded. "Naruto, send in a single clone. Stealth recon. I want to know what we're walking into." A clone flickered into existence and melted into the shadows of the forest. The feedback it sent back to Naruto was a chilling portrait of quiet despair. The villagers were there, sitting in their homes, staring at walls, their movements slow and listless. They were alive, but they were empty shells, their life force siphoned away. But the clone also found something else. At the center of the village, beneath the old community well, was a hidden entrance, masked by a powerful genjutsu and a complex suppression seal. "The lab is directly beneath the village," Naruto reported, his voice tight. He built his facility and used the entire populace as his own private petri dish. Under the cover of darkness, they slipped into the village. The place was a ghost town populated by the living dead. As they approached the central well, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a man in the tattered robes of a village elder, but his eyes were vacant, his skin had a strange, waxy pallor, and his movements were jerky, unnatural. "You should not be here," the man said, his voice a dry, rasping whisper that seemed to come from all directions at once. This is a place of quiet rest. Sasuke's Sharingan flared. He's a puppet, he hissed. There are chakra threads connected to his spine, coming from below. Suddenly, more figures emerged from the houses around them. A dozen villagers, all with the same empty eyes, the same jerky movements. They formed a silent, menacing circle around the trio. So, Orochimaru left his puppets to guard the door, Jiraiya murmured, his hand reaching for a scroll. No, Naruto said, stepping forward. They're not just puppets. They're victims. He looked at the empty faces, at the faint, flickering embers of their chakra. We're not here to fight them. He brought his hands together in a seal that was unfamiliar to Sasuke. It was not a combat jutsu. It was a Fuinjutsu seal, one he had learned from Jiraiya's scrolls. Sealing art, chakra suppression field, Naruto whispered. A wave of invisible, intricate chakra erupted from him. It didn't attack. It enveloped. The chakra threads controlling the villagers were instantly severed. The suppression seal on the well flickered and died. And the villagers, their strings cut, collapsed to the ground, not dead, but falling into a deep, healing sleep. Jiraiya stared, his eyes wide with shock. That's a Jonin level suppression seal. To cast it over such a wide area, with such precision. Kid, when did you? I had some downtime on the boat, Naruto said with a shrug. With the guards neutralized and the entrance revealed, they descended into the darkness beneath the well. The laboratory was colder, more clinical than the last one. This was a place of biology, of cellular science. Vats of green liquid lined the walls, containing half-formed things that defied description. And in the center of the lab, they found him. It was not Orochimaru. The man was thin and tall, with sharp features and hair the color of bleached bone. He wore a pristine white lab coat over a standard Sounin uniform, and his eyes, magnified by thick spectacles, held a look of cold, intellectual detachment. His chakra signature was strange, primarily his own, but laced with the faint, unmistakable traces of Orochimaru's serpentine energy. Remarkable, the man said, not looking up from the complex array of medical equipment he was monitoring. Your suppression field is quite elegant. A wide-spectrum pulse designed to sever external chakra manipulation without harming the host system. Crude, but effective. I must get a sample. He turned, his eyes finally landing on them. There was no malice in his gaze, only a chilling, scientific curiosity. Jiraiya of the Sannin. The Uchiha prodigy. And the Jinchuriki. Lord Orochimaru's files, while extensive, do not do you justice. You have us at a disadvantage, Jiraiya said, his stance shifting into a low, ready crouch. Forgive my manners. I am Kido, the man said with a slight, almost imperceptible bow. I was Lord Orochimaru's chief biologist and the director of this facility. His recent setback has left me in charge of his legacy. He gestured to the vats around them. I have been continuing his work. Perfecting it. He held up a syringe filled with a glowing, crimson liquid. And now, with this sample of Uzumaki DNA, salvaged from the last lab, and the data from your previous encounters, I believe I have finally done it. I have stabilized the cellular regeneration process. I have created a perfect vessel. He plunged the syringe into his own arm. His body began to convulse, his chakra flaring wildly. He was not just healing himself, he was evolving, rewriting his own genetic code with the stolen life force of Naruto's clan. Lord Orochimaru sought immortality through vessel transference, Kido hissed, his voice changing, becoming stronger, more resonant. A flawed, messy process. I, however, have achieved true evolution. The ability to endlessly regenerate and adapt. He smiled, a cold, passionless expression. I should thank you, Naruto-kun. Your very existence provided the final piece of the puzzle. And now, I will show you the true meaning of power. Task Force Hurricane had followed the serpent's trail, and it had led them straight into the heart of a new, more terrifying nightmare. Kido's transformation was not the grotesque, monstrous metamorphosis of Orochimaru. It was a silent, terrifyingly efficient process. There was no shedding of skin, no reptilian contortion. His body simply perfected itself. The pale, sallow skin gained a healthy, vibrant luster. The thin, academic frame filled out with lean, perfectly defined muscle. The faint traces of Orochimaru's chakra were burned away, consumed and repurposed by the potent, crimson energy of the Uzumaki DNA. He stood taller, his posture radiating a calm, absolute power. The only outward sign of the change was in his eyes. Behind his spectacles, they now glowed with the same faint, crimson light as the syringe he had used. He had not become a monster. He had become a perfect human specimen, a god in a lab coat. The process is complete, Kido stated, his voice now a smooth, resonant baritone. The cellular degradation has been overcome. The regeneration is absolute. He flexed his hand, and the bones in his fingers elongated into sharp, ivory-colored blades. And the applications are limitless. Jiraiya didn't wait for another word. He charged, a Rasengan already forming in his hand, a swirling vortex of power aimed at ending this abomination before it could take another breath. You defile the memory of a noble clan, he roared. Kido didn't dodge. He simply raised an arm, which flattened and hardened into a shield of hyper-dense bone. Jiraiya's Rasengan slammed into the shield, the sound a deafening grind of competing energies. The shield cracked, but it held. Kido was pushed back several feet, but he was otherwise unharmed. The cracks in his bone shield filled in and repaired themselves in less than a second. Your technique is impressive, Jiraiya-sama, Kido said calmly. But it is predicated on causing massive cellular damage. A meaningless concept to one who can regenerate from any injury. From the side, Sasuke struck. He moved like a bolt of lightning, his Chidori screaming as he aimed for Kido's exposed flank. Kido, without even looking, morphed his other arm into a long, sharp spear, intercepting Sasuke's attack. Lightning met bone, and the resulting explosion of energy threw Sasuke back. And your Sharingan is a fascinating tool for predicting movement, Kido continued, his head turning to track Sasuke's trajectory with an unnerving smoothness. But it cannot predict a defense that has no set form, that can be anywhere and everywhere at once. The fight became a desperate, frustrating battle. Jiraiya would attack with overwhelming power, only to have Kido create a perfectly formed shield to absorb the blow. Sasuke would attack with blinding speed, only to be met with an instantly generated spear or blade that forced him to disengage. Kido wasn't just regenerating, he was adapting, his body flowing and reshaping itself into the perfect counter for every attack. He was a living weapon, constantly evolving on the battlefield. Naruto stood back, his face a mask of intense concentration. He wasn't watching the fight with his eyes, he was watching it with his mind. He had 50 clones hidden throughout the lab, their senses linked to his, observing the battle from every conceivable angle. They weren't just watching Kido's movements, they were analyzing his chakra. His regeneration isn't a jutsu, Naruto's internal monologue raced. It's a biological process, fueled by the Uzumaki DNA. The Crimson Chakra. It's the fuel source. It's potent, but it's finite. Every time he regenerates, every time he morphs a limb, he consumes a small amount of that stored energy. He's not a god. He's a battery. We just have to run him dry. He relayed his analysis to Jiraiya and Sasuke through a series of pre-arranged hand signals, a silent, high-speed communication that went unnoticed by their opponent. The plan was simple, force Kido to regenerate as rapidly as possible. A war of attrition. The nature of their assault changed. Jiraiya abandoned his single, powerful Rasengans and instead began to use wide arc fire jutsu, forcing Kido to generate massive, full-body shields to protect himself and the delicate equipment in the lab. Sasuke stopped trying for a single, decisive Chidori and instead unleashed a relentless barrage of fireball jutsus, peppering Kido from all sides, forcing him to constantly morph and defend. Kido laughed, a cold, humorless sound. A futile effort. You cannot hope to exhaust a power source as vast as the Uzumaki life force. But Naruto could see it. With every defensive measure, the crimson glow of Kido's chakra dimmed, almost imperceptibly. The battery was draining. My turn, Naruto said, stepping forward. He created 100 clones. They didn't swarm Kido. They spread out, each one forming a small, stable Rasengan in its hand. You think your numbers will succeed where a Sannin has failed? Kido scoffed. It's not about success, Naruto replied. It's about math. The clones charged. It was a relentless, rolling wave of attacks. Kido moved with a fluid, deadly grace, his arms becoming blades, shields, and whips as he destroyed clone after clone. But for every clone he destroyed, he had to block a Rasengan. For every Rasengan he blocked, his crimson chakra dimmed. It was a simple, brutal equation of exchange. He was trading his finite, stolen life force for Naruto's seemingly infinite supply of disposable chakra batteries. After weathering the assault of 50 clones, Kido was visibly slower. The regeneration was taking a fraction of a second longer. A thin sheen of sweat was visible on his brow. The god was beginning to feel the strain. It's over, Kido, the real Naruto said, appearing before him as the last clone dispersed. You stole the power of my clan. But you never understood its true strength. It's not just about vitality. It's about will. And your will is nothing but a pale imitation of a greater man's ambition. He raised his hand, and with the help of 2 clones, formed the Rasen Shuriken. The shriek of the wind blades filled the lab, a sound of absolute finality. Kido's eyes widened in genuine terror. He had seen the data on this jutsu from Naruto's fight with Kabuto. He knew what it did. He tried to form a shield, but his regeneration, taxed to its absolute limit, faltered. Naruto thrust the Rasen Shuriken forward. "This is for the ghost in the other lab," he said, his voice cold as ice. "And for all the people you sacrificed for your sick obsession." The jutsu connected. The dome of white, chaotic energy erupted, and the sound of a million microscopic blades slicing through cells echoed in the confined space. Kido didn't even have time to scream. His perfect body, his stolen evolution, was unmade, disassembled on a molecular level. When the light faded, all that remained was a pile of dust and a shattered pair of spectacles on the cold, stone floor. The lab was silent. Jiraiya and Sasuke stood panting, looking at the spot where their opponent had been. "We need to destroy this place," Sasuke said, his voice grim. "All of it." Naruto nodded. He walked to the center of the room and placed his hands on the floor. He closed his eyes, drawing on a massive reserve of chakra. But he wasn't forming a combat jutsu. He was using his wind nature to find the resonant frequency of the rock that formed the cavern. "What is he doing?" Sasuke asked. "Something new," Jiraiya breathed, watching with awe. "Wind style, resonant collapse," Naruto whispered. He fed a steady, pulsing stream of wind chakra into the cavern's foundations. A low hum began to fill the air. The hum grew into a deep, vibrating groan. The vats of green liquid began to tremble and crack. The stone walls began to splinter. "Time to go," Naruto said, opening his eyes. The 3 of them fled the lab, racing up the stairs and out of the well just as the entire cavern imploded behind them. The ground shook violently, and the village of Kusamura, its foundations gone, collapsed into a massive sinkhole, burying Orochimaru's legacy, and the horrors it contained, under 1,000,000 tons of earth and rock. They stood at the edge of the newly formed crater, the dust settling around them. They had won. They had erased another piece of the serpent from the world. "The villagers," Sasuke said, looking at the sleeping forms that Naruto's clones were now carefully moving to a safe location. "Tsunade can help them," Jiraiya said. "Their life force was drained, not destroyed. With time, and her skill, they can recover." He looked at Naruto, who was staring into the crater, his expression unreadable. The boy had not just defeated a foe who had outmatched a Sannin, he had done it with tactics, precision, and a level of control that was frankly terrifying. The training trip had entered its 2nd year. Task Force Hurricane had won its first major victory. But as they stood in the silence of the ruined valley, they all knew that this was just the beginning. The serpent had many heads, and the storm of the Akatsuki was still gathering on the horizon. Their war in the shadows was far from over. The dust settled over the massive crater that had once been Kusamura, leaving a profound and unnatural silence. The horrors of Orochimaru's legacy were buried, but the victory felt hollow, a grim necessity in a war fought far from the light. Task Force Hurricane had won the battle, but the experience had left its own scars. They made camp a dozen miles away, in a hidden glen where the oppressive silence of the valley gave way to the gentle sounds of a living forest. While Naruto's clones carefully transported the sleeping villagers to a location where Jiraiya's network could arrange for their recovery, the 3 of them sat around a small, smokeless fire, the events of the day replaying in their minds. Sasuke was cleaning his kunai with a methodical, almost obsessive precision, his Sharingan deactivated but his focus absolute. He had seen the limits of his own speed and power against a foe like Kido. His Chidori, his clan's fire jutsu, they were powerful tools, but they were predictable. Kido had adapted to them. He needed something more, a new variable for his arsenal that couldn't be so easily analyzed. Naruto was meditating, but it was not the calm, focused meditation of before. He was sorting through the chaotic feedback of the battle, deconstructing Kido's abilities, his regeneration, the very nature of the stolen Uzumaki chakra. He had won through overwhelming force and tactical attrition, but it had been costly. The phantom ache of the 5th gate still resonated in his cells. Kurama's warning echoed in his mind: true power comes from perfect, absolute control. It was Jiraiya who broke the silence. "That lab was just one of many," he said, staring into the flames. "Orochimaru was a collector of secrets, a hoarder of power. The trail from here will be cold. His remaining agents will have scattered to the winds now that we've destroyed their primary research facility. So we hunt them down," Sasuke said, his voice flat. "We will," Jiraiya affirmed. "But hunting blindly is a fool's errand. We need a new advantage. A new perspective. He looked at both of them, his expression uncharacteristically solemn. Your training has focused on honing your own chakra, perfecting your own techniques. You have become masters of your internal energy. But you've ignored the single greatest source of power in the world. He held up his hand, and a small, perfectly formed Rasengan appeared in his palm. But it was different. It was denser, more stable, and it seemed to hum with a life of its own, drawing in the faint light of the fire. Natural energy, Jiraiya said. The chakra that exists in all living things, in the very air we breathe, the ground we walk on. It is the source of all jutsu, the wellspring of all life. A shinobi who can feel it, who can draw it in and blend it with their own chakra, can touch upon a level of power that makes even the likes of Orochimaru seem insignificant. He looked at Naruto. This is the next stage for you. The ultimate form of chakra control. It is called Shinjutsu, the art of the sages. Naruto's eyes widened. He remembered the feeling, the sheer, overwhelming power of Jiraiya's own chakra when he had entered that strange, transformed state during their confrontation with Itachi. And for you, Sasuke, Jiraiya continued, turning to the Uchiha. This presents a unique challenge. Your Sharingan can see chakra, but it cannot see natural energy. It is a power that must be felt, not observed. Learning to sense it will force you to develop skills beyond your dojutsu, to heighten your other senses to a level that will make you almost impossible to deceive. It will complete you as a shinobi. The new path was laid before them. It was not a path of destruction, but of harmony. Of balance. Where do we learn it? Naruto asked, his voice filled with a new, intense curiosity. Not where, Jiraiya said with a cryptic smile. But with whom? He bit his thumb and slammed his hand on the ground. With a large puff of smoke, a small, ancient-looking green toad with large, wise eyes appeared. Jiraiya boy, the toad croaked, its voice old and raspy. You call at last. The great elder has been expecting you. Their destination was a place not on any map, Mount Myoboku, the legendary land of the toads, a hidden realm where natural energy flowed like a river. Getting there was the first test. Jiraiya led them to a remote, hidden spring deep in the mountains of the land of keys. The water of the spring was thick, like oil, and shimmered with a strange, otherworldly light. This is a nexus, Jiraiya explained. A place where the veil between our world and theirs is thin. To pass through, you must sync your chakra with the toad's summoning contract. It requires perfect stillness, perfect focus. For Naruto, it was a new kind of hell. His entire being was geared towards action, towards overwhelming effort. To sit perfectly still, to calm the raging ocean of his chakra into a placid lake, was a monumental challenge. His first attempts to sync with the portal resulted in him being violently ejected, sent skipping across the surface of the spring like a stone. Sasuke faced a different struggle. His mind, so used to the analytical precision of the Sharingan, struggled to grasp a concept he couldn't see. He had to learn to trust his other senses, to feel the subtle vibrations of the portal, to hear the faint hum of its energy. It was a humbling experience, forcing him to abandon his greatest weapon and rely on a more primal intuition. They spent a week at the spring, a week of intense, frustrating meditation. The rivalry between them found a new, quieter expression. It was a competition of stillness, a race to see who could achieve perfect balance first. It was Sasuke who succeeded first. In a moment of insight, he deactivated his Sharingan completely, plunging himself into a world of pure sensation. He felt the portal not as an object, but as a presence, a song. He matched his chakra's rhythm to that song, and the oily water of the spring accepted him, pulling him under without a ripple. Naruto, seeing his rival vanish, felt a surge of frustration. But he channeled it, not into more effort, but into more focus. He remembered Kurama's words. Perfect, absolute control. He stopped fighting his own chakra. He stopped trying to command it. He simply let it be, allowing it to settle, to find its own natural state of equilibrium. And in that moment of surrender, he felt the connection. The portal opened for him. He was pulled into a world of vibrant, impossible color. He found himself standing on a massive lily pad in a vast, misty swamp. Giant, toad-shaped mountains loomed in the distance, and the air itself hummed with a palpable, life-giving energy. Sasuke was already there, standing on a nearby lily pad, looking around with a mixture of awe and analytical curiosity. Before them stood Jiraiya and the two great toad sages, Fukasaku and Shima, perched atop the head of Gamabunta. Welcome, boys, Fukasaku croaked, his voice ancient and wise. To Mount Myoboku. Your training in the art of the sages begins now, Shima added, her tone sharp and businesslike. But be warned. This is not a power to be taken lightly. Here, You will learn to become one with the world, or the world will turn you to stone. Their journey had taken them from the world of men to the realm of legends. The final year of their training would not be about mastering jutsu, but about mastering the world itself. And the challenges they would face would be greater than any human opponent. The air on Mount Myoboku was alive. It was the first thing both Naruto and Sasuke noticed. It wasn't just the hum of palpable energy, it was the sheer, overwhelming vitality of the place. The light seemed richer, the colors of the giant flora more vibrant, the very stones beneath their feet thrumming with a deep, ancient power. This was a world saturated with the natural energy Jiraiya had spoken of. Their training began immediately, under the stern tutelage of Fukasaku and Shima. Jiraiya, for the first time, took a step back, becoming an observer. This was a discipline even he had not fully mastered, he was as much a student here as they were. Senjutsu is the art of balance, Fukasaku croaked, his old eyes fixed on them. To master it, you must perfectly blend your own spiritual and physical energy with the natural energy of the world. It is a trinity of power. Too much of your own chakra, and the jutsu fails. Too little, and the natural energy will overwhelm you, transforming you into a part of the landscape. You will become a toad, and then a stone statue for all eternity. To demonstrate, he pointed to a collection of grotesque, toad-like statues scattered across the swampy clearing. Our previous students, Shima added grimly. They lacked the proper balance. The first stage of their training was deceptively simple, to sit perfectly still and feel the natural energy around them. They were led to a series of cascading waterfalls that poured a thick, viscous oil from a secret toad spring instead of water. This oil attracts natural energy, Fukasaku explained. Apply it to your skin. It will help you absorb the energy of the world. But it will also accelerate the petrification process if you fail to control it. The moment you feel your body begin to harden, you must use your own chakra to push the natural energy out, or I will do it for you. He held up a strange, staff-like rod. With this, it will be unpleasant. For Sasuke, the experience was a profound violation of his senses. His entire life as a shinobi had been defined by what he could see with his Sharingan. Now, he was being asked to perceive an energy that was invisible to his greatest asset. He sat, his eyes closed, the sticky toad oil cool on his skin, and tried to feel. He could feel the heat of the sun, the coolness of the breeze, the vibrations of the ground. But the natural energy remained an elusive, frustrating concept. It was like trying to see a new color. He knew it was there, but he had no frame of reference for what it was supposed to feel like. Naruto faced a different, more complex problem. He could feel the natural energy almost immediately. It was a warm, welcoming presence, a boundless ocean of power that called to the Uzumaki vitality within him. The issue was his own internal ocean. His chakra reserves were so vast, so chaotic, that trying to blend them with the subtle flow of nature was like trying to mix a single drop of dye into a raging river. The moment he drew in the natural energy, his own chakra would surge to meet it, overwhelming the delicate balance and forcing him to expel it before the petrification could begin. Adding to the complexity was Kurama. You are a fool to attempt this, the fox rumbled in the back of his mind. This natural energy is pure. My chakra is pure malice. They are oil and water. They cannot mix. Every time you draw that energy into your body, you are inviting a war within your own coils. You are lucky it hasn't detonated you already. The first few days were a litany of failure. Sasuke would sit for hours in perfect stillness, his frustration mounting as he failed to grasp the sensation he was searching for. Naruto, meanwhile, would repeatedly absorb the energy, only to have his own chakra flare uncontrollably, causing a small part of his hand or foot to turn gray and stone-like before Fukasaku would whack him with the staff, sending a jolt of painful energy through him that expelled the Senjutsu chakra. The rivalry, once again, forced them to adapt. Sasuke, realizing his own senses were failing him, began to use his Sharingan in a new way. He didn't try to see the natural energy. He watched Naruto. He observed the subtle shifts in Naruto's chakra network just before he failed, the way the energy flowed, the precise point where the balance was lost. He was using his eyes to understand a problem of feeling. Naruto, in turn, deployed his clones. But they didn't practice the technique. He sent them to the far corners of Mount Myoboku with a single instruction: meditate and feel. One clone would sit atop the highest mountain, feeling the rush of the wind. Another would sink to the bottom of the oily swamp, feeling the pressure and the stillness. A third would sit within the heart of a giant, breathing flower, feeling the slow, rhythmic pulse of its life. They gathered sensory data, not on jutsu, but on the world itself. The memories that flowed back to Naruto Prime were a symphony of sensation, a library of feelings that gave him a deeper, more intuitive understanding of the energy he was trying to wield. The breakthrough came, as it often did, from a moment of shared insight. "You're trying to contain it," Sasuke said one evening, his voice low as he watched Naruto nurse a partially petrified hand. "You draw it in, and your chakra immediately tries to build a cage around it. That's when you lose control." Naruto looked at his hand, then at Sasuke. "What am I supposed to do? Let it run wild?" "No," Sasuke said, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "You don't contain it. You become a conduit. You let it flow through you. You guide it, you blend with it, but you never try to hold it. Your chakra should be a riverbank, not a dam." The simple analogy, born from Sasuke's visual analysis of Naruto's repeated failures, clicked in Naruto's mind. He had been treating it like his own chakra, a force to be commanded. But natural energy wasn't a tool, it was a partner. He sat, applied the oil, and closed his eyes. He drew in the natural energy, and as his own chakra surged to meet it, he didn't try to suppress it. He guided it. He imagined Sasuke's riverbank, allowing the two energies to flow alongside each other, to mingle, to harmonize. For a glorious, heart-stopping second, he felt it. A perfect, tripartite balance. His body felt light, powerful, connected to everything around him. The world opened up, no longer a collection of objects, but a single, living, breathing entity. He could feel the pulse of the mountains, the thoughts of the insects, the song of the wind. He opened his eyes. Around them, a faint, orange pigmentation had appeared, the first, faint sign of sage mode. He had done it. But the balance was fragile. The sheer joy of his success caused his own chakra to flare, and the harmony shattered. He felt the stone creeping up his arm again and quickly expelled the energy. But he had touched it. He knew the path now. Seeing Naruto's success, Sasuke felt a familiar surge of frustration, but it was tempered with a new understanding. He had been trying to find a single sensation, a single frequency. But Naruto's experience proved it was a harmony, a chord made of multiple notes. He closed his eyes once more, deactivating his Sharingan, and instead of searching, he simply listened. He listened to the world with all of his senses, and for the first time, he began to hear the faint, beautiful music of the world's own chakra. Their final year of training had begun. They were no longer just learning to fight. They were learning to become one with the world itself. And the power they would unlock would change the very nature of the war they were destined to fight. Touching the shores of Senjutsu and mastering it were two vastly different oceans. The initial breakthrough had given Naruto and Sasuke the map, but the journey through its treacherous waters had just begun. The final year of their training trip, spent entirely within the vibrant, energy-saturated world of Mount Myoboku, was a testament to their two divergent philosophies of power. Sasuke's path was one of stillness. Having finally perceived the music of natural energy, he dedicated himself to achieving the perfect mental and physical equilibrium required to draw it in. For him, it was a profound exercise in humility. He, the Uchiha prodigy, had to unlearn a lifetime of reliance on his Sharingan. He spent weeks in deep meditation, his eyes closed, his dojutsu suppressed, learning to feel the world in a way he never had before. He learned to feel the subtle shift in air pressure that preceded a toad's leap, the faint vibration in the earth from a burrowing insect, the change in temperature from a passing cloud. His senses, once secondary to his sight, became razor sharp, honed by the constant, overwhelming symphony of life on the mountain. His progress was slow, methodical, and marked by a quiet, iron-willed determination. He would sit for hours, perfectly still, drawing in tiny amounts of natural energy, blending them with his own meticulously controlled chakra. His first successful entry into sage mode was not a dramatic explosion of power, but a quiet, seamless transition. The purple pigmentation, the mark of a perfect snake sage, appeared around his eyes, and the world transformed. He could feel everything, see everything, not just with his eyes, but with his entire being. He had achieved balance through perfect, internal control. Naruto's path, by contrast, was a storm. His initial method of blending the energies was inconsistent, his massive chakra reserves and the ever-present malice of Kurama making the delicate balance a constant struggle. He could touch sage mode, but he couldn't hold it. It was Fukasaku who provided the key, a solution so perfectly tailored to Naruto that it could have worked for no one else. "The problem, Naruto boy, is that you cannot be still while gathering energy," the old toad croaked. "Your own nature is one of constant movement, of action. So, do not try to be still. Outsource it." The idea was revolutionary. Naruto created two shadow clones. They sat perfectly still, their sole purpose to absorb and balance natural energy. Naruto Prime, meanwhile, was free to move, to train, to fight. When he needed the power, he would simply dispel one of the clones. The perfectly balanced Senjutsu chakra would then flood into him, instantly granting him access to Sage Mode without the need for the dangerous, vulnerable stillness. It was a brilliant, unorthodox solution to a unique problem. He had weaponized his greatest weakness, his inability to be still, and turned it into his greatest strength. He could now enter Sage Mode in the heat of battle, a feat previously thought impossible. With the method of entry solved, their training moved to the final stage, combat application. Sage Mode does not just amplify your ninjutsu, Shima explained, her tone sharp and academic. It infuses your very being with the power of the world. Your taijutsu becomes an extension of that power. This is the frog kata, kawazu kumite. She demonstrated. A simple, open palm strike from her small, webbed hand missed Jiraiya by a foot, yet the Sannin was sent flying backwards as if hit by an invisible cannonball. The natural energy you command creates an aura around you, Fukasaku elaborated. An extension of your own body. You can strike an opponent without ever physically touching them. Your senses are heightened to a point where you can react to threats before they even materialize. It is the ultimate form of taijutsu. Their sparring sessions became a spectacle of legendary power. Sasuke, in his Sage Mode, was a phantom of deadly precision. His movements were flawless, his senses so acute that he could predict Naruto's attacks by feeling the subtle disturbance in the natural energy around him. His Chidori, now infused with Senjutsu, was no longer just a blade of lightning, it was a bolt of divine judgment, faster, sharper, and impossibly powerful. Naruto, using his clone infusion method, was a force of nature. His frog kata turned every punch and kick into a devastating shockwave. His Rasengan, when combined with Sage Mode, became the Odama Rasengan, a colossal sphere of spiraling energy that could carve a crater into the side of a mountain. His Rasen Shuriken, once a suicidal technique that damaged his own body, was now a weapon he could throw, its microscopic wind blades guided by his sage-enhanced senses, a guaranteed one-hit kill. They pushed each other to new heights. Sasuke's perfect defense and predictive abilities forced Naruto to become more creative, more unpredictable. Naruto's overwhelming power and unorthodox tactics forced Sasuke to refine his senses, to find new ways to counter an opponent who could attack without moving. Jiraiya watched them, a feeling of profound pride warring with a deep, chilling apprehension. These boys were no longer just his students. They had surpassed him. They were wielding a power that he himself had never fully mastered. They were on the level of the first Hokage, of Madara Uchiha. They were titans, and they were only 16 years old. On the last day of their final year at Mount Myoboku, Fukasaku and Shima gathered them at the portal spring. "There is nothing more we can teach you," Fukasaku said, a deep respect in his ancient voice. "You have mastered the art of the sages in a way no human has since the great sage himself. The world of men is in turmoil," Shima added. "It needs its heroes. Do not linger here." Jiraiya stood beside them, a complex expression on his face. His mission had been to train them, to prepare them for the Akatsuki. He had succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. He had not trained two powerful shinobi. He had forged two living legends. As they stepped back into the oily water of the portal, they were not the same boys who had left Konoha 3 years prior. They were harder, sharper, their power a deep, quiet ocean of controlled energy. They had walked the path of the sages and returned with the power of the world at their fingertips. They emerged back in the hidden spring in the land of keys, the mundane air of their own world feeling thin and muted after a year breathing the vibrant energy of Mount Myoboku. They spent a week in a small, quiet town, reacclimating, recalibrating their newfound senses to a world where the life force was a whisper, not a roar. It was a week of quiet contemplation, of two rivals feeling the vast new power humming within them, wondering where the path would lead them next. Far to the east, in a damp, hidden cave on the coast of the land of water, a different kind of recalibration was taking place. The air was thick with the scent of blood, antiseptic, and despair. Mei Terumi, her beautiful features etched with weariness and frustration, moved through the makeshift infirmary, her hands glowing with the green chakra of medical ninjutsu. Around her lay the wounded, the survivors of her latest failed assault on the forces of the 4th Mizukage, Yagura. The injuries were horrific. Not clean cuts from blades, but grotesque coral growths erupting from flesh, limbs twisted by crushing waves of water, and minds shattered by powerful genjutsu. Yagura was a perfect Jinchuriki, a master of the Three Tails power, and his control was absolute. Every attempt the rebellion made to dislodge him from power ended like this, in blood, defeat, and a slow retreat back to the shadows. "It's no use," Ao, her most trusted subordinate and a veteran with a stolen Byakugan, said grimly. "We can't get close to him. His coral ninjutsu creates a kill zone, and his tailed beast bomb is absolute. We lack the firepower to break through his defense and the speed to evade his attacks. Mei pressed her lips into a thin line, her own powerful lava and boil release techniques feeling inadequate. We are losing, ow. Our numbers are dwindling. The people are losing hope. If we cannot break this stalemate soon, the rebellion will die, and the bloody mist will drown this country for good. It was at that moment that two figures emerged from the shadows at the mouth of the cave. The rebels tensed, their hands flying to their weapons, but Mei raised a hand, her eyes widening slightly in recognition. Zabuza Momochi, she said, her voice a mixture of surprise and suspicion. I thought you had abandoned this fight for a mercenary's life. Zabuza, his face unbandaged and his gaze hard, stepped into the dim light. Beside him stood Haku, his presence as quiet and cold as a winter morning. They had returned from their mission in the land of waves changed, their brief encounter with Team 7 having planted a seed of something other than nihilism in their hearts. The world is smaller than you think, Zabuza grunted. Gado's tyranny in wave was just a symptom of the disease that started here. We've come home to finish the fight. We welcome any blade to our cause, Mei said, but even a demon like you cannot scratch Yagura. Perhaps not alone, a soft voice said. It was Haku. He stepped forward, his gaze meeting Mei's. But we are not alone in this world. There are other powers. Other. Jinchuriki. Mei's eyebrow rose. The nine tails of Konoha? He is but a child. A weapon Konoha would never lend us. He is more than a child, Haku stated, his mind flashing back to the bridge, to the overwhelming red chakra, to the boy who had spoken of protecting his precious people. We faced him. He was young, but his power was immense, and his will was absolute. That was years ago. He must be far stronger now. He looked at Mei, his expression earnest. Yagura's tyranny is a threat to the entire world, not just our own. The bloodline purges, the isolationism. It breeds instability. Konoha, under its new Hokage, values stability above all. They may not see us as allies, but they see Yagura as a threat. It is a logical appeal. Mei considered his words. It was a desperate gamble, an appeal to a rival village that had every reason to see them fail. But Haku was right. Their current path led only to annihilation. A new variable was needed. Ow, Mei commanded. Draft a letter to the Hokage. A formal request for an alliance. State our case logically. Frame it as a matter of international security. It is a long shot. But it is the only shot we have left. A week after returning from Mount Myoboku, Jiraiya, Naruto, and Sasuke were in a small town, eating a quiet meal, when a small, scroll-carrying toad appeared on their table in a puff of smoke. Jiraiya took the scroll, his expression hardening as he read the coded message within. It's from Tsunade, he said, his voice low. He looked at Naruto, then at Sasuke. Our mission has been updated. It seems the political landscape has shifted. He explained the situation, the rebellion in the land of water, their desperate struggle against a perfect Jinchuriki, and the formal request for aid from Konoha. Tsunade has agreed, Jiraiya concluded. She sees an opportunity to end the era of the bloody mist and forge a new, powerful alliance. But she cannot send an army. It would be an act of war. She is sending a scalpel, not a sword. He looked at the two of them, the two boys who had just mastered the power of sages. Task Force Hurricane is being deployed to the land of water. Our new objective, assist the Mist Rebellion, neutralize Yagura, and end a civil war. The hunt for the serpent was being put on hold. A new, far more public and dangerous mission had just begun. Their training was truly over. It was time to show the world what they had become. Chapter 5, The Land of Bloody Mists. The journey to the land of water was a descent into a different kind of shadow. The open sea and the wild, untamed islands were behind them, replaced by the clandestine routes of a nation at war with itself. They traveled not as a training unit, but as a scalpel, moving through the periphery of the country, guided by Jiraiya's network to a series of hidden coves and forgotten fishing villages that served as the rebellion's secret lifelines. The country was suffocating under the oppressive, chakra-dense mist that seemed to cling to everything, a physical manifestation of Yagura's rule. The people they saw were gaunt, their eyes filled with a deep, pervasive fear. The vibrant trade of other nations was absent here, replaced by the grim, silent efficiency of Yagura's hunter-nin patrols. This was the Bloody Mist, a name earned through decades of brutal purges and paranoid isolationism, and Task Force Hurricane walked directly into its heart. Their rendezvous point was a storm-lashed beach on a remote peninsula, a place of black sand and jagged rocks. As they stepped ashore, three figures emerged from the mist. The man in the lead was tall and scarred, an eye patch covering his right eye, while a complex seal covered the Byakugan beneath it. This was Mei Terumi's right hand. Flanking him were Zabuza, Momochi and Haku, their presence as sharp and cold as the sea spray. Zabuza's eyes widened almost imperceptibly as he saw them. The two boys he remembered from the bridge were gone. In their place stood two young men who radiated a power so deep and controlled it was unnerving. Naruto, in particular, was a paradox. He stood with a relaxed, easy posture, yet Zabuza, a man who had survived by sensing killing intent, could feel a coiled, terrifying power beneath that calm exterior, a sleeping titan that made the demon he had once been seem like a petulant child. Jiraiya of the Sannin, Ao said, his voice a low growl. His Byakugan was active, and he was visibly struggling to comprehend the chakra signatures he was seeing. The Hokage's message said she was sending a scalpel. She has sent us a sledgehammer. He was looking directly at Naruto. The kid's grown, Jiraiya said with a grin. We have little time for pleasantries, Ao stated, turning to lead them into the dense, twisted forest. Our main camp is hidden deep within these mountains. Yagure's forces are on the move. We must be quick. They were led through hidden paths, past villages that were little more than hollowed-out shells, their inhabitants either dead or conscripted into Yagure's army. It was a land bleeding from 1,000 cuts. The rebel headquarters was a vast, natural cavern hidden behind a waterfall, a bustling hive of desperate activity. Wounded shinobi were being tended to in one corner, while others sharpened blades or studied maps under the dim light of chakra lamps. The air was thick with the scent of medicinal herbs and the low hum of grim determination. At the center of it all stood Mei Terumi. She was as beautiful as the rumors claimed, but her face was etched with the deep weariness of a leader carrying the weight of a dying cause. She turned as they entered, her gaze sharp and analytical. You are Konoha's aide? She asked, her voice a smooth, melodic contralto that held an undercurrent of steel. Her eyes swept over Jiraiya, then Sasuke, before finally landing on Naruto. She, like Ao, felt the sheer depth of his power, a calm, bottomless ocean of energy that seemed utterly at odds with his age. Task Force Hurricane, at your service, Jiraiya said with a slight bow. Tsunade sends her regards, and her best assets. Assets, Mei repeated, her expression skeptical. We are fighting a perfect Jinchuriki, Jiraiya-sama. A man who can level a mountain with a single attack. I hope your assets are more than just a political gesture. Zabuza stepped forward. I have seen the boy fight, he grunted, gesturing to Naruto. He was a demon on the bridge in the land of waves. But that was years ago. Yagura is a different beast entirely. Jiraiya chuckled. You're right. He's not the same boy you fought on that bridge. He turned to Naruto. I think a demonstration is in order. The rebels need to see what they're working with. They need to believe. Mei led them to a larger, secondary cavern, one side of which opened up to the sea, overlooking a desolate stretch of rocky coastline. Show me, she commanded. Show me the power that can defeat a tailed beast. Naruto walked to the edge of the cliff, the sea churning 100 feet below. He didn't speak. He didn't make a grand gesture. He simply closed his eyes. Two shadow clones flickered into existence beside him and immediately sat down, entering a state of perfect, still meditation. Naruto took a deep breath, and the world seemed to hold its own. The rebels watched, confused. What was he doing? Then, it happened. Naruto opened his eyes. They were the same brilliant blue, but now, surrounding them, was a vibrant, orange pigmentation. A cross-like pattern formed in his pupils. He had entered sage mode instantly, seamlessly. The natural energy of the world flooded into him, and the rebels gasped. Ao's Byakugan went wide with disbelief. He was seeing it, but he couldn't comprehend it. The boy's chakra network had expanded, intertwined with the very life force of the planet. He was no longer just a shinobi, he was a part of the world itself. Incredible, Mei whispered. Naruto raised his hand, and a swirling sphere of blue chakra formed in his palm. It grew rapidly, fed by the immense power of his sage mode, until it was the size of a boulder. The Odama Rasengan. He didn't throw it at a target. He simply pushed it forward, into the empty air over the ocean. As the colossal sphere left his hand, he made a single, almost imperceptible hand seal. Sage art, wind style, Rasengan barrage. The single Odama Rasengan exploded, not into a chaotic blast, but into 1,000 smaller, perfectly formed Rasengans, each one humming with the contained fury of a storm. They shot downwards, a meteor shower of pure, destructive power, and slammed into the ocean. The sea itself screamed. The impact didn't create a splash, it created a cataclysm. A massive, perfectly circular section of the ocean, half a mile wide, was vaporized in an instant, the water flash boiling into a colossal pillar of steam that shot 1,000 feet into the sky. The shockwave that followed was not a gust of wind, it was a physical blow, a solid wall of force that sent the rebels stumbling back, their ears ringing, their minds reeling. When the steam cleared, the rebels stared in stunned, absolute silence. Where there had once been a churning sea, there was now a temporary crater in the ocean floor, the water held back by the sheer, lingering force of the attack. Zabuza stared, his jaw slack, the executioner's blade on his back feeling like a child's toy. Haku looked at Naruto, the memory of the boy on the bridge replaced by the reality of the god before him. Ao deactivated his Byakugan, rubbing his eye as if to make sure it wasn't deceiving him. Mei Terumi, the leader of the rebellion, the future 5th Mizukage, looked at the boy who had just demonstrated the power to boil the very oceans, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a surge of genuine, unadulterated hope. So, Naruto said, his sage mode receding, his voice calm as he turned back to them. That's the plan for Yagura's tailed beast bomb. I'll meet it with one of my own. Now. What's the plan for getting us close enough to do that? The legend had begun. Not with a whisper, but with a roar that shook the very foundations of the world. The silence that followed Naruto's question was heavier than the one that had followed his demonstration. The raw, godlike power was one thing, a force of nature to be awed. But the calm, tactical question that came after it was something else entirely. It was the question of a commander, a strategist who saw his own overwhelming power as just one piece on a much larger, more complex board. Mei Terumi was the first to recover. The shock in her eyes was replaced by a sharp, calculating glint. The hope his power had given her was now being tempered by the reality of the war she was fighting. She looked at Naruto, and for the first time, she saw not just the Jinchuriki, not just the living natural disaster, but a fellow leader. That, she said, her voice regaining its steel, is the question that has cost me hundreds of my best shinobi. She turned, gesturing for them to follow her back into the main cavern, which now served as their war room. The rebels, who had been staring at Naruto as if he were a deity, now looked at him with a new kind of respect as he walked past. They had seen his strength, now they were about to witness his mind. In the center of the cavern, a massive, meticulously detailed map of Kirigakure was laid out on a stone table. It was a fortress city, a labyrinth of canals, high walls, and fortified towers, all centered around the massive, imposing structure of the Mizukage's office. This is our problem, Mei began, her finger tracing the outer perimeter of the village. Yagura's control is absolute. The entire village is a fortress. His hidden mist jutsu is perpetually active, blanketing the city in a chakra-dense fog that disrupts sensory abilities and makes long-range communication impossible. Our forces get separated, disoriented, and picked off by his hunter nin patrols. Ao stepped forward, his Byakugan active as he stared at the map. My eye can penetrate the mist, but only to a degree. The sheer density of Yagura's chakra pollutes my vision, making it difficult to track multiple targets. And his most elite guards, the remnants of the 7 swordsmen, are masters of the silent killing technique. They thrive in that environment. So a frontal assault is suicide, Jiraiya surmised, his eyes scanning the map with a veteran's practiced gaze. You've tried infiltration? Many times, Zabuza grunted, stepping out of the shadows. The waterways are trapped. The walls are lined with detection seals. The air itself is a sensor. I know this fortress better than anyone, and I tell you, there is no silent way in. The problem seemed insurmountable. They had the weapon to defeat Yagura, but they couldn't get it to the target. Sasuke, who had been silent until now, leaned over the map, his 3 Tomoe Sharingan spinning as he absorbed every detail. You're thinking like assassins, he said, his voice quiet but sharp. You're trying to find a single, unguarded path. There isn't one. The entire fortress is the path. He pointed to a series of aqueducts and sewer grates marked on the map. These are weaknesses. Not for entry, but for disruption. A coordinated attack here, he tapped a major water reclamation plant, and here, he indicated a primary chakra conduit for the village's lighting, would cause chaos. It would disrupt the flow of the village, create blind spots, and force Yagura to divert his forces to damage control. Mei looked at Sasuke, impressed by his cold, tactical logic. A diversion. We've tried that. Our forces are too small to create a diversion large enough to draw the attention of the main guard. Your forces aren't, Naruto said, stepping up beside Sasuke. He looked at Mei, his blue eyes holding a calm, unwavering certainty. But mine are. He placed his hands on the map. The problem isn't getting a strike team in. The problem is creating an opening big enough for them to exploit. We don't need a subtle diversion. We need a full-scale invasion. He looked up, his gaze sweeping across the rebel leaders. I will create 5,000 shadow clones. We will divide them into 4 battalions. The 1st battalion, he pointed to the northern sea wall, will launch a direct amphibious assault. Their goal is not to breach the wall, but to draw the bulk of Yagure's external forces. The 2nd battalion will use my whirlpool jutsu to disrupt the main shipping channels, forcing his naval patrols to respond. The 3rd will execute Sasuke's plan, attacking the infrastructure, creating chaos within the city itself. And the 4th? Mei asked, her voice a hushed whisper, completely captivated by the scale and audacity of his plan. Naruto smiled, a flash of the old, confident grin. The 4th battalion is the real invasion. 2,000 clones. They won't attack the walls. They will attack the mist itself. Using their wind chakra, they will work in unison to literally blow the hidden mist jutsu away from a single, designated sector of the city. For a few crucial minutes, there will be a corridor of clear air leading directly to the Mizukage tower. No mist, no sensory disruption. A clean line of attack. The cavern was silent. The rebels were staring at him, their minds struggling to comprehend the sheer, magnificent insanity of his strategy. He wasn't just planning a battle, he was planning to command a force larger than their entire standing army and use it to wage war on the weather itself. While my clones create the largest diversion in the history of warfare, Naruto continued, his voice dropping, a single, elite strike team will move through the cleared corridor. Their objective, Yagura. Who would be on this team? Ao asked, his voice tight with anticipation. Sasuke, Naruto said without hesitation. His Sharingan will be our eyes, seeing through any traps or genjutsu that remain. Mei-san, he turned to her, and for a moment, their eyes met. He saw the leader, the warrior, but also the woman carrying an impossible burden. She saw the boy, the legend, but also the brilliant commander who was offering her a lifeline. Your boil and lava release will be the key to melting through the physical defenses of the tower itself. Zabuza and Haku, your knowledge of the tower's interior and your silent killing techniques will get us through his personal guard. Ao, your Byakugan will be our guide, spotting reinforcements before they can reach us. And you? Mei asked softly. I'll be with you, Naruto said. My job is to handle the tailed beast. The rest is up to us, as a team. Jiraiya stood back, a wide, proud grin spreading across his face. The kid wasn't just a weapon anymore. He was a cage, in all but name. Mei stared at the map, then at the faces of her most trusted shinobi, then back at the calm, confident young man before her. The plan was audacious, it was borderline impossible, but it was also brilliant. It was the first plan she had heard that didn't just account for Yagure's power, but actively turned the battlefield to their advantage. Very well, Naruto-kun, she said, a slow, genuine smile gracing her lips for the first time since their arrival. It was a smile that lit up the dark cavern, a beacon of renewed hope. It seems we have a war to plan. The mood in the cavern shifted. The grim despair was replaced by a buzzing, electric energy. For the first time, victory didn't feel like a distant, impossible dream. It felt like a tangible, achievable objective. The legend of the Hurricane of Konoha was about to be written, not in the annals of a history book, but in the blood and mist of a nation's rebirth. The 2 days leading up to the assault were a whirlwind of meticulous, high-speed preparation. Naruto, acting as supreme commander, worked tirelessly with Mei and Ao to coordinate the timing and positioning of the rebel forces, who would act as a crucial support and containment element. His clones, meanwhile, were a constant, humming presence, running drills, memorizing attack vectors, and synchronizing their timing to the split second. Sasuke and Jiraiya were a quiet, deadly storm of their own, sparring relentlessly to hone their teamwork, their movements becoming a seamless dance of fire, lightning, and sage-enhanced taijutsu. On the 3rd day, under the cloak of a pre-dawn twilight, the operation began. From a high cliff overlooking Kirigakure, Naruto stood with the strike team, his eyes closed in concentration. Below, the city was a sleeping beast, shrouded in its perpetual, chakra-infused mist. All battalions are in position, he said, his voice calm and steady. Phase 1 begins. Now. It started not with a bang, but with a rumble. To the north, the sea began to churn as the 1st Battalion, 2,000 strong, erupted from the depths, a tide of orange and blue charging the sea walls. Simultaneously, the 2nd Battalion, positioned miles out at sea, unleashed their combined whirlpool jutsu. A series of massive, roaring vortexes tore through the shipping lanes, throwing Yagure's naval patrols into chaos. Alarms began to shriek across the city. The beast had been woken. As the bulk of Kiri's forces rushed to repel the coastal assault, the 3rd Battalion made its move. All across the city, coordinated explosions rocked the infrastructure. Water mains burst, sending geysers into the streets. Chakra conduits overloaded, plunging entire districts into darkness. It was the chaos theory Sasuke had envisioned, executed on a massive scale. The city's internal defenses were in disarray, its forces scattered and confused. Phase 2, Naruto commanded. This was the masterstroke. The 4th Battalion, 2,000 clones positioned in a wide arc on the western flank of the city, acted as one. They didn't use a jutsu. They used pure, focused wind chakra, each clone exhaling a controlled, powerful gust. It was 2,000 synchronized breaths, a man-made hurricane. The effect was immediate and breathtaking. The thick, oppressive mist, a permanent fixture of the city for years, began to move. It didn't just thin, it was torn, shredded, and violently shoved aside. A massive, clear corridor of air, a mile long and 100 yards wide, was carved through the fog, leading from the outer walls directly to the base of the Mizakage's tower. For the first time in years, the sun shone on the streets of Kirigakure. Go, Naruto said to the strike team. You have 10 minutes before they can re-establish the mist. They moved. A 7-person cell of S-rank power, sprinting through the eerily silent, sun-drenched corridor while the sounds of a raging war echoed around them. They moved with a speed and silence that was terrifying, a ghost unit slicing through the heart of the enemy's fortress. They were halfway to the tower when they were intercepted. 4 figures dropped from the rooftops, landing silently in their path. They were not the scattered remnants of the 7 swordsmen of the mist. They were something else, something older. Each wore the traditional Kiri uniform, but their masks were those of the Mizakage's personal guard, and the weapons they carried were legendary. One held a cruel, bladed whip that crackled with lightning. Another carried a massive, spiked club that seemed to absorb the very light around it. The third wielded 2 short, hooked swords that dripped with a viscous green poison. The fourth, their leader, was unarmed, but his hands glowed with a pale, chilling chakra. The 4 pillars of the bloody mist, Zabuza growled, his hand tightening on his executioner's blade. Yagura's most loyal dogs. Each one is said to be cage level in their own right. This is as far as you go, traitors, the unarmed leader said, his voice a low hiss. The Mizakage's reign will not be threatened by foreign dogs and domestic filth. Jiraiya stepped forward, a grim smile on his face. Looks like they saved the best for last. This is our fight. He looked at Sasuke, who was already analyzing their opponents, his Sharingan spinning. Ready for a real challenge, kid? Sasuke smirked, a feral, excited glint in his eyes. They'll do. May, take the others and go, Jiraiya commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. We'll handle the welcoming committee. Clear the path. May hesitated, her gaze torn between the immediate threat and the ultimate objective. He's right, Naruto said, his voice calm. This is what a team does. We trust each other to handle our part of the mission. He looked at May, his expression firm. Your job is to get us into that tower. Their job is to make sure no one follows. Let's go. May nodded, her resolve hardening. Jiraiya-sama, Sasuke-kun. We are in your debt. With that, she, Naruto, Zabuza, Haku, and Ao leapt past the standoff, continuing their sprint towards the tower. Jiraiya and Sasuke stood back to back, facing down the 4 legendary shinobi. The air crackled with power. So, Jiraiya said, a wide, predatory grin spreading across his face. Which one of you wants to dance with a toad sage first? The battle for the soul of Kirigakure had split into 2 fronts, a clash of legends on the streets, and a final, desperate race to the heart of the tyrant's power. As Naruto's team sped away, Jiraiya and Sasuke turned their full attention to the 4 pillars of the bloody mist. The air grew thick, charged with the pressure of 6 cage-level shinobi about to unleash hell. I'll take the big one, Jiraiya said, his grin widening as he pointed to the behemoth with the spiked club. You and your fancy eyes handle the whip and the poisoner, kid. We'll corner the leader together. Don't give me orders, Sasuke retorted, but a smirk of his own betrayed his excitement. His Sharingan was already spinning, deconstructing their opponent's stances, weapons, and chakra flow. The leader, a man named Kaido, simply watched them, his hands still glowing with pale chakra. Your arrogance will be your undoing, he hissed. Engage. The fight exploded. The man with the lightning whip, Raiga, moved first, his weapon cracking like thunder as it lashed out at Sasuke. The whip was not a solid object, but a chain of pure, focused lightning, impossibly fast and capable of changing direction in mid-air. Simultaneously, the poisoner, Swearin, vanished, her movements silent as she blended into the shadows, her twin hooked blades dripping with a neurotoxin that could kill with a single scratch. Sasuke was a phantom. He flowed around the lightning whip, his Sharingan predicting its every arc, his body moving with a fluid grace that seemed impossible. He didn't engage directly. He threw a volley of shuriken, not at his opponents, but at the surrounding buildings, using the ricochets to force them out of their coordinated attack pattern. Jiraiya, meanwhile, was a force of nature. He met the charge of the club wielder, Genji, head-on. The massive club swung down with enough force to shatter the street, but Jiraiya, entering a partial sage mode that painted his eyes with orange pigment, caught it on his outstretched arm. The ground beneath him cracked, but he didn't budge. "My turn," the Sannin growled. With a mighty heave, he threw Genji and his club into a nearby building. Sage art, massive Rasengan. A colossal sphere of spiraling energy formed in his hand, and he slammed it after his opponent, the resulting explosion leveling half the city block. While the two powerhouses clashed, Sasuke was locked in a deadly dance with Raiga and Swerin. He was outnumbered, but his Sharingan evened the odds. He could see the subtle muscle twitches that preceded Raiga's whip strikes, the faint shimmer of chakra around Swerin's poison blades as she appeared from the shadows for a killing blow. It was a high-speed chess match, a battle of prediction and misdirection. He was holding his own, but he couldn't find an opening. "You are impressive, Uchiha," Kaido, the leader, said, appearing suddenly behind Sasuke. "But you are still just a boy." His hand, coated in the pale, chilling chakra, reached for Sasuke's head. It was a jutsu designed to instantly disrupt the central nervous system. "Fire style, Great Dragon Fire Jutsu," Sasuke roared, not at Kaido, but at the ground. A massive, dragon-headed torrent of flame erupted from his mouth, turning the street into a sea of fire. It wasn't an attack, it was a wall, a desperate move to create distance. Jiraiya, having dispatched Genji for the moment, saw the danger. "Kid, get back," he yelled. "This is a new level." He slammed his hands together. Sage mode. Jiraiya's transformation was complete. The orange pigmentation around his eyes became more pronounced, and two small toads appeared on his shoulders, Fukasaku and Shima. His chakra exploded, a tangible aura of natural energy that warped the very air around him. "It's been a long time since anyone forced me to get this serious," Jiraiya said, his voice now a deep, resonant boom. "Let's end this." Meanwhile, the strike team reached the base of the Mizukaga's tower. The structure was a monolithic fortress of dark stone, its walls slick with the constant mist. There were no visible entrances on the ground floor. "The main entrance is halfway up, to prevent direct assaults," Zabuza explained, pointing to a large, sealed gate 50 feet above them. "It's shielded by a chakra-infused steel door." "Leave that to me," Mei said. She stepped forward, her hands flashing through a series of seals. "Lava release, melting apparition jutsu." She spat a massive glob of viscous, bubbling lava at the wall. It wasn't an explosion. It clung to the stone and steel, melting it like wax. The S-rank defensive door, which could have withstood a dozen explosive tags, dissolved into a pool of molten slag, revealing a dark corridor beyond. "Haku, Zabuza," Mei commanded. "You're on point." The two former mist swordsmen nodded and vanished into the darkness. The sounds that followed were brief and final, the soft hiss of senbone, the wet thud of a silenced blow, the faint gurgle of a dying guard. "Clear," Zabuza's voice echoed from within. They entered the tower. The interior was a cold, damp labyrinth of identical-looking corridors, a design meant to confuse and disorient intruders. "This way," Ao said, his Byakugan active. "I can see the flow of chakra. Yagura is in the throne room, at the very top. But the path is lined with traps. And his personal guard." As they rounded a corner, a dozen elite Kiri Onbu dropped from the ceiling, their masks emotionless, their blades drawn. Mei didn't even break stride. "Boil release, skilled mist technique." She exhaled a fine, acidic mist that filled the corridor. It wasn't the thick, vision-obscuring mist of the village, it was a corrosive, deadly vapor. The Onbu screamed as their masks and armor began to dissolve, their skin blistering on contact. They collapsed, their bodies smoking, before they could even launch an attack. Mei walked through the dissipating acid cloud, her expression a mask of cold fury. This was her home, her village, and these shinobi were the instruments of its sickness. There was no mercy in her heart for them. Naruto watched her, a silent respect in his eyes. He saw the pain of a leader forced to kill her own people to save them, the heavy burden she carried. His hand instinctively went to the first Hokage's necklace, still tucked safely in his pouch. He understood, more than ever, the weight of that title. They ascended through the tower, a whirlwind of deadly efficiency. Ao's Byakugan spotted the traps, Haku's ice mirrors dealt with ranged attackers, Zabuza's silent killing cleared choke points, and Mei's Kekkei Genkai melted through every obstacle in their path. They were a perfect spear, aimed at the heart of the fortress. Finally, they reached the top floor. A single, massive set of stone doors stood before them, pulsing with a faint, malevolent chakra. "This is it," Ao said, his voice grim. "The throne room. His chakra is just beyond this door. It's immense." "I'll handle the door," Naruto said, stepping forward. He didn't form a Rasengan. He simply placed his palm on the stone. He closed his eyes, entering sage mode in an instant. The orange pigment flared around his eyes. He channeled a massive amount of natural energy into his hand. "Sage art, shattering palm," he whispered. The stone doors didn't explode. They disintegrated. They crumbled into fine dust, which was then blown away by a gentle puff of wind, revealing the room beyond. The throne room was a vast, circular chamber, its walls made of dark, polished stone. In the center, on a simple, unadorned throne, sat a figure that seemed far too small for the immense power he radiated. Yagura Kuratachi, the fourth Mizukage, looked up at them. He had a youthful, almost childlike face, with a prominent scar under his left eye. He wore the traditional cage robes, but they hung loosely on his small frame. He held a simple staff in his hand. He looked less like a tyrant and more like a lost boy. But his eyes were ancient, cold, and filled with the suffocating power of the tailed beast within. "So," Yagura said, his voice a calm, chilling monotone that echoed in the vast chamber. "The traitors and their foreign dogs have finally reached the heart of the temple." He stood up, his small frame seeming to cast a shadow that dwarfed them all. "You have come all this way only to die. Your rebellion ends here." Naruto stepped forward, the sage marking still vivid around his eyes. He looked at Mei, at Zabuza, at the others. "This one is mine," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Get the civilians out of the city. End the fighting. I'll handle the source of the problem." He turned his full attention to Yagura, and the air in the room grew heavy, the very stones seeming to vibrate with the pressure of two Jinchuriki about to unleash their power. The final battle for the land of water was about to begin. Mei and the others stared, caught between the two epicenters of power. Naruto's calm, sage-infused chakra was a deep, steady ocean. Yagura's was a chaotic, malevolent storm, a vortex of hate and raw energy that seemed to drink the very light from the room. "Leave?" Yagura tilted his head, a grotesque, childlike curiosity in his cold eyes. "No one is leaving. This room is a tomb. My tomb. And you will all be buried in it with me." He didn't make a hand seal. He didn't use a jutsu. He simply let go. A wave of violent, crimson chakra erupted from his small frame, shattering the stone throne and cracking the floor beneath him. His body began to contort, to expand, his skin bubbling and reforming into a monstrous new shape. The transformation was not the slow, agonizing process Gaara had undergone, it was a practiced, instantaneous explosion of power. "He's releasing the seal." Mei screamed, a look of pure terror on her face. "Get back!" The roof of the Mizukage's tower exploded upwards in a shower of stone and shrapnel. The walls blew outwards. In a matter of seconds, the throne room was gone, replaced by an open, windswept platform at the pinnacle of Kirigakure. And standing where Yagura had been was a beast of pure, mythological horror. It was Isabu, the Three Tails. A colossal, turtle-like creature covered in a spined, armored shell, with three massive, shrimp-like tails lashing the air. Its single, blood-red eye fixed on Naruto, and it let out a roar that was not a sound, but a physical concussion, a wave of killing intent that washed over the entire city, shattering windows and sending a tremor through the very soul of the nation. Down below, the fighting stopped. The rebel forces, the loyalist Kiri-nin, and the civilians hiding in their homes all looked up in terror at the monster that had just appeared atop the tower, silhouetted against the gray, misty sky. Their tyrant had revealed his true form. "By the gods," Ao whispered from a safe distance, his Byakugan showing him a creature made of chakra so dense it was like staring into a sun. Mei stood beside him, her heart sinking. "This is it. This is the power we could never overcome." But Naruto didn't flinch. He stood on the ruined platform, the wind whipping his Jonin vest, his sage mode aura a steady, unwavering flame in the face of the hurricane. He looked at the colossal tailed beast, and then he looked down at the city below. He could feel their fear, their despair. He knew this battle wasn't just about defeating a tyrant. It was about killing a nightmare. "So, you finally decided to come out and play," Naruto said, his voice calm but carrying over the roar of the wind. "I was getting bored. Aisabu roared again and swiped with a massive, clawed hand, an attack that could cleave a mountain. Naruto vanished. He reappeared in the air above the beast's head, his hands forming a familiar seal. Sage art, massive Rasengan barrage. A storm of colossal Rasengans, each one the size of a house, rained down on the three tails. The impacts were deafening, each explosion sending a shockwave through the city. The rebels below cheered, seeing their new ally meet the monster head-on with overwhelming force. But when the smoke cleared, Aisabu was still there, its armored shell scorched and cracked, but largely unharmed. It shook its massive head, its single eye burning with rage. Its defense is too strong, Sasuke observed from the streets below, his Sharingan tracking the battle with frantic intensity. Even Naruto's sage art can't break through that shell in one go. He knows, Jiraiya said, his gaze fixed on the sky. The kid's just getting started. He's gathering data. Up on the tower, Naruto landed lightly on a floating piece of debris. He knew he couldn't win a battle of pure attrition. Aisabu's chakra was vaster than his own, and its defense was absolute. He needed to find a weakness. Aisabu opened its massive maw, and a dense, volatile sphere of red and blue chakra began to form. A tailed beast bomb. He's going to wipe out half the city. Mei screamed. Naruto didn't hesitate. He held out his own hand, and with the help of two clones who appeared beside him, he formed his ultimate technique. The shriek of the wind style, Rasen Shuriken cut through the air, a sound of impending doom. He didn't throw it. He met the tailed beast bomb head on. As Aisabu fired its blast of pure destruction, Naruto shot forward, the Rasen Shuriken in his hand. The two attacks met halfway between the tower and the city. The result was not an explosion. It was an uncreation. The Rasen Shuriken's microscopic wind blades didn't just counter the tailed beast bomb, they tore it apart on a molecular level. The volatile energy was shredded, unraveled, and dispersed harmlessly into the atmosphere. The attack that could have leveled a nation was neutralized by a single, perfectly applied jutsu. The entire city stared in stunned silence. They had just witnessed a mortal cancel out the ultimate power of a god. Naruto, however, had seen what he needed to see. During the clash, as Aisabu's mouth was open, he had sensed it with his sage abilities, a concentration of chakra deep within the beast's throat. It was Yagura, the man inside the monster, the pilot in the machine. Found you, Naruto whispered. He created 1,000 clones. They swarmed Aisabu, not attacking, but latching onto its shell, its limbs, its tails, their combined strength and chakra working to immobilize the massive beast. Aisabu thrashed, throwing clones off by the dozen, but for every one it dislodged, 10 more took its place. It was being anchored, held down by an army of sheer will. Then, the real Naruto, a new Rasengan in his hand, shot towards the beast's head. Aisabu, pinned and enraged, opened its mouth to roar. It was the opening Naruto had been waiting for. He shot directly into the beast's mouth, traveling down its gullet, surrounded by a maelstrom of corrosive chakra. He followed the flow of energy to its source, and there, suspended in a sphere of crimson energy, was Yagura. It's over, Naruto said, his voice echoing in the strange, internal space. Yagura looked at him, a flicker of his own personality returning to his eyes, a flash of fear, of regret. He made me do it. The man in the mask. Naruto's eyes widened. Another player. A hidden hand. But it didn't matter now. The damage was done. The sickness had spread too far. I know, Naruto said, his voice softening for a moment. He saw not a tyrant, but another lonely Jinchuriki, twisted and broken by the power he held. Rest now. He pressed the Rasengan against the central core. The spiraling chakra didn't just attack Yagura, it disrupted the very seal that bound him to the three tails. The connection between man and beast shattered. On the outside, the colossal form of Aisabu shuddered violently, then began to dissolve, its chakra receding back into the ether, returning to the earth from whence it came. From the dissolving form, two figures fell, Naruto, and the unconscious, now human, body of Yagura. Naruto landed on the ruined tower, catching Yagura's limp form. He laid him gently on the ground. The man was broken, his mind shattered by years of being a puppet, his body ravaged by the tailed beast's power. He was dying. Mei and the others rushed to his side. Is it over? She asked, her voice trembling. Naruto looked down at the former Mizukage, then at the city below, where the fighting had stopped, where rebels and loyalists alike were staring up at them in stunned awe. He knew that as long as Yagura drew breath, even in this state, he would remain a symbol of the old regime, a potential seed for future conflict. The civil war needed to end. Not with a truce, but with a definitive conclusion. It was a grim, necessary calculus. The duty of a Jonin. The burden of a cage. He placed a hand on Yagura's chest. He didn't use a jutsu. He simply poured a small, gentle amount of his own chakra into him, a final, merciful act that helped the last embers of Yagura's life fade into a peaceful darkness. The tyrant was dead. Naruto stood up and looked out at the city. He had not just defeated a tailed beast. He had liberated a nation. And every single person in the land of water had borne witness. The whispers of the hurricane of Konoha were about to become a roar that would be heard across the entire world. The silence on the ruined pinnacle of Kirigakure was a fragile thing, punctuated by the mournful whistle of the wind through shattered stone. Below, the war had ceased. The roars of a tailed beast and the clash of jutsu were replaced by a spreading, disbelieving quiet as thousands of eyes, rebel and loyalist alike, remained fixed on the lone figure standing over the body of their fallen cage. Naruto's sage mode receded, the orange pigmentation fading from his eyes, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep weariness. The adrenaline of battle vanished, and the immense physical and spiritual cost of his actions settled upon him like a leaden cloak. He had not just fought a war, he had ended one. Mei Terumi was the first to approach, her steps sure and steady across the rubble. She stopped before him, her gaze not on the body of her former tyrant, but on Naruto. She saw the exhaustion in his posture, the old soul in his young eyes, and the almost imperceptible tremor in his hands. This was the aftermath, the quiet, unseen price of a miracle. "It is done," she said, her voice a soft murmur that was nearly lost to the wind. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact, a confirmation of a reality she was still struggling to comprehend. "It's done," Naruto affirmed, his voice raspy. Down below, the city began to stir. The stalemate broke. Loyalist shinobi, their leader and the source of their power gone, began to lower their weapons. The rebels, hesitant at first, then with a growing, triumphant roar, began to secure the city. The civil war had ended not in a bloody, final battle, but in a moment of collective, stunned surrender. Later that day, in the heavily damaged but structurally sound Mizukage's office, the new leadership of Kirigakure convened. Mei sat at the head of the great table, the seat of power feeling foreign and heavy. Ao stood at her side, his Byakugan having confirmed the cessation of all organized resistance. Zabuza and Haku lingered in the shadows, their roles as rebels now shifting to that of enforcers for the new regime. And at the table, as honored guests and foreign assets, sat Jiraiya, Sasuke, and Naruto. "The loyalist factions have surrendered unconditionally," Ao reported, his voice tight with a mixture of relief and disbelief. "Your display of power, Naruto Dono, did more than defeat Yagura. It shattered the morale of his entire army. They did not just lose their leader, they lost their god. The process of rebuilding will be long and difficult," Mei said, her gaze sweeping over the room. "We must root out the corruption, reform the academy, and reopen our nation to the world. We must wash away the blood." Her eyes settled on Naruto. "A task that would have been impossible without the aid of Konoha. Without you." The gratitude in her voice was genuine, but it was layered with something more complex. It was the awe and apprehension a nation's leader feels when confronted with a power that could just as easily have destroyed them. Later, as the strategic meetings wound down, Mei found Naruto standing alone on a balcony overlooking the now peaceful city. The mist, for the first time in years, was beginning to thin naturally, allowing the pale evening light to touch the streets. "A heavy burden, isn't it?" she asked softly, coming to stand beside him. "What is?" Naruto asked, not looking away from the city below. "The power," she answered. "To hold the fate of so many in your hands. To know that a single decision, a single jutsu, can mean the difference between life and death for thousands," she sighed, a sound of profound weariness. "I have fought my whole life for this chance to lead, and now that it's here, I find the weight of it is more than I imagined." "You'll get used to it," Naruto said. It wasn't a boast. It was a simple statement of fact from someone who had carried a similar, if different, weight his entire life. Mei looked at him, at his profile outlined against the setting sun. She saw the hero who had boiled the sea, the commander who had planned a perfect invasion, and the executioner who had mercifully ended a tyrant's life. But in that quiet moment, she also saw a 16-year-old boy carrying the burdens of a man 3 times his age. A subtle, unexpected warmth bloomed in her chest, a feeling of protective admiration for the young man who had saved her nation. "Yagura said something," Naruto said suddenly, his voice low. "Just before the end. He said, 'The man in the mask made me do it.'" Mei's eyes widened. "A man in a mask? Was he coherent?" "No," Naruto admitted. His mind was shattered. "But it was the clearest thing he said. It felt important. He was right. That night, in the privacy of their quarters, Naruto relayed the information to Jiraiya and Sasuke. The room grew cold. A man in a mask, Jiraiya repeated, his face a grim mask. My network has been tracking the Akatsuki for years. Their leadership is a complete mystery. We know they operate in cells of two, but who gives the orders, who pulls the strings? It's all shadows and whispers. This is the first concrete lead we've ever had. Sasuke's Sharingan spun, processing the new data. So Yagura wasn't the true tyrant. He was a puppet, just like the villagers in the land of grass. Someone is pulling the strings of world events, using Jinchuriki as their personal weapons of mass destruction. And not just any Jinchuriki, Jiraiya added, his gaze heavy as he looked at Naruto. The fourth Mizukage was a perfect Jinchuriki, just like you are becoming. To control him, to bend his will so completely. The perpetrator must possess an incredibly powerful dojutsu. One capable of casting a genjutsu so flawless that not even the victim or the tailed beast within them is aware of it. The implication hung in the air, unspoken but terrifyingly clear. A Sharingan. A Mangekyo Sharingan. The victory in the land of water, as monumental as it was, suddenly felt like a single battle in a much larger, more insidious war. They had killed the puppet, but the puppet master was still out there, his hands reaching for the strings of the world. Our mission isn't over, Naruto said, his voice hard as flint. It's just become more complicated. Task Force Hurricane had liberated a nation and forged a powerful new alliance. But in doing so, they had peeled back another layer of the conspiracy that threatened to consume the world, revealing a darkness far deeper than they had ever imagined. Their journey was far from over. Task Force Hurricane remained in Kirigakure for 2 weeks following the death of Yagura. It was a period of tense, yet hopeful, transition. The city, free from the oppressive mist for the first time in a generation, was slowly coming back to life. The work was grueling. Rebel and former loyalist forces had to be integrated, a process fraught with suspicion and old hatreds. The economy, long crippled by isolationism, needed to be rebuilt from the ground up. And the psychological scars of the Bloody Mist regime ran deeper than any physical damage. Through it all, Mei Terumi was a pillar of strength and decisive leadership. She moved through the city with a tireless energy, her presence a calming balm on the raw nerves of her people. But it was during the late-night strategy sessions, poring over maps and resource reports, that she and Naruto forged an unexpected bond. They would often be the last two left at the great table in the Mizukage's office, the others having retired in exhaustion. In these quiet moments, the Kage-in-waiting and the young Jonin spoke not as political allies, but as leaders sharing an impossible burden. She spoke of the difficulty of forgiving those who had followed Yagura, of the pain of rebuilding a nation from ashes. He, in turn, spoke of the weight of his own power, of the loneliness of being a Jinchuriki, a conversation he had never been able to have with anyone else. They look at you with hope, Naruto observed one night, watching from the balcony as the first new fishing boats set out from the harbor. But it's a heavy kind of hope. They expect you to fix everything. And they look at you with awe, Mei countered, her voice soft as she came to stand beside him. As if you were a god who descended to save them. Does that weight not crush you? It used to, Naruto admitted. Now. I just see it as a responsibility. A problem to be solved, like any other. She looked at him, at the quiet strength in his profile, and felt that now familiar warmth. It was a profound respect for the old soul residing within the 16-year-old boy. It was a connection that transcended politics and alliances, a quiet understanding between two hurricanes, one of power and one of will, who had found a moment of stillness in each other's presence. While the political landscape shifted, the training continued. Jiraiya used Kirigakure as a real-world classroom for espionage. He had Sasuke use his Sharingan to identify and root out Orochimaru's sleeper agents still hidden within the Kiri-Anbu, a task the Uchiha took to with a chilling efficiency. He had Naruto's clones work with Ao's sensory unit, creating a new, joint intelligence network that could monitor the entire land of water. The day of their departure came on a clear, bright morning. The city's main port, once a place of grim military function, was filled with civilians who had come to see them off. They didn't cheer loudly. It was a more solemn, more meaningful gesture. A collective, silent nod of gratitude. Mei stood at the head of the pier, flanked by Ao, Zabuza, and Haku. She was now officially the 5th Mizukage, her reign ratified by the Council of Shinobi Clans. Konoha has earned more than an ally today, she said, her voice carrying across the quiet crowd. It has earned a friend. The land of water will not forget what you have done for us, Naruto Uzumaki. She stepped forward and, to the shock of everyone present, placed a light, fleeting kiss on Naruto's cheek. For the hero who saved my nation, she whispered, for his ears only. May your path be safe. Naruto, for the first time in years, felt a genuine blush creep up his neck, a moment of boyish awkwardness that made Jiraiya roar with laughter and Sasuke roll his eyes. As their new, state-of-the-art Kiri vessel pulled away from the port, Naruto looked back at the new Mizukage, a small smile on his face. The victory here felt different. It felt like the beginning of something, not just the end of a conflict. Their new destination was the land of tea, a neutral nation known for its sprawling trade routes and information brokers. Jiraiya's network had picked up a whisper, a rumor of a black market auction where items from one of Orochimaru's abandoned weapon labs were being sold to the highest bidder. If Orochimaru had a weapons lab, chances are the Akatsuki know about it, Jiraiya explained as they studied the mission scroll. This auction is the perfect place to pick up their trail. We go in, identify the players, and find out who is trying to get their hands on Orochimaru's legacy. They arrived in the land of tea a week later, once again shedding their identities to become anonymous travelers. The atmosphere was a stark contrast to the oppressive gloom of the mist. Here, everything was for sale, and information was the most valuable commodity. Their target was a clandestine auction held in a fortified tea house. Getting an invitation was the first challenge. Jiraiya, in his element, vanished into the city's underbelly to work his connections. Naruto and Sasuke were tasked with surveillance. From a rooftop overlooking the tea house, Sasuke watched the clientele, his Sharingan memorizing the faces of the powerful merchants and rogue shinobi coming and going. Naruto, meanwhile, had 100 clones scattered throughout the city's inns and bars, listening. The pieces came together quickly. The auction was being run by a powerful information broker known only as the Appraiser. The main item up for bid was a single, sealed scroll, rumored to contain the schematics for Orochimaru's most powerful cursed seals. This is it, Jiraiya said when they reconvened. The Akatsuki will be here. They wouldn't let technology like that fall into anyone else's hands. The night of the auction was tense. Using Jiraiya's hard-won invitations, they entered the tea house, not as a team, but as 3 separate individuals, Jiraiya as a wealthy, eccentric collector, Sasuke as his silent, brooding bodyguard, and Naruto, using a transformation jutsu, as a low-level information runner. The auction room was filled with the worst of the shinobi underworld. Mercenary lords, missing nin, even a few disgraced daimyo. Naruto moved through the crowd, a ghost in the machine, his sage-enhanced senses on high alert, feeling for any familiar, malevolent chakra signatures. He found them in a secluded balcony overlooking the main floor. 2 figures in black cloaks with red clouds. He couldn't see their faces, but he could feel their power. It was cold, ancient, and utterly without emotion. One felt like a puppet, his chakra signature strangely hollow. The other felt like a living sandstorm. Sasori and Deidara. Naruto subtly signaled their position to Jiraiya and Sasuke. The plan was not to engage. It was to observe, to see who they were meeting, what they were after. The auction began. The final item was the scroll. As the bidding started, a third figure joined the 2 Akatsuki members on the balcony. He was a man Naruto didn't recognize, but his chakra felt familiar, laced with the same serpentine energy as Kido's. It was one of Orochimaru's agents. The 3 of them weren't bidding. They were watching. Waiting. As the final bid was about to be called, it happened. The lights in the tea house flickered and died. The room was plunged into absolute darkness and chaos. When the lights came back on a second later, the scroll was gone. And so were the Akatsuki and Orochimaru's agent. They didn't come to bid, Sasuke's voice murmured in Naruto's ear, having appeared silently beside him. They came to steal. And to meet, Naruto added. This wasn't just a theft. It was a handoff. Orochimaru's people are working with the Akatsuki. They're liquidating his assets, selling his research to fund their operations. The conspiracy was deeper than they had imagined. It wasn't just one man in a mask. It was a network, a shadow economy of terror. As the tea house erupted into angry shouts and drawn blades, Jiraiya appeared between them. We're leaving. Now. They slipped out in the chaos. They had their lead. The Akatsuki were not just hunting, they were consolidating power, absorbing the remnants of Orochimaru's empire. They're heading west, Naruto said, his clones already tracking the fading chakra signatures. Towards the mountains on the border of the land of Earth. An old Iwa stronghold, Jiraiya mused. A good place to hide, to study their new prize. He looked at his 2 students, their faces hard and determined in the moonlight. Our mission continues, he said. We're no longer just following the serpent's trail. We're chasing the red clouds. The interior of the fortress was a testament to Iwa's brutalist architecture, vast, geometric halls carved from the mountain's heart, designed to withstand a siege. The air was cold and dead, the only sound the rhythmic dripping of water and the faint, echoing mutterings from deep within. Task Force Hurricane moved with a synchronized, predatory silence. Naruto, his sage-enhanced senses active, acted as the point man. He didn't just feel for chakra signatures, he felt the subtle disturbances in the air, the vibrations in the stone, the very life force of the mountain itself. With his wind chakra, he created a small, localized bubble of silence around them, swallowing the sound of their footsteps, turning the three powerful shinobi into ghosts. Sasuke was their eyes, his Sharingan cutting through the oppressive darkness, seeing the flow of residual chakra left by the fortress's long-dead inhabitants and the fresh, potent signatures of their targets ahead. Jiraiya was the anchor, his immense experience allowing him to read the fortress's layout, to anticipate choke points and potential ambush sites. They followed the sound, the soft, rhythmic thumping and the arrogant muttering, down a long, wide corridor that opened into a massive cavern, clearly once a subterranean training ground. The cavern was now a macabre workshop. In the center, a figure with shaggy blonde hair, his back to them, was kneading a mound of white clay with a strange, second mouth on the palm of his hand. This was Deidara. The rhythmic thumping was the sound of him working the clay, infusing it with his explosive chakra. Scattered around him were his finished sculptures, small, intricate birds, spiders, and centipedes made of clay, each one a beautiful, deadly bomb. To the side, hunched over a workbench littered with gears, wires, and poison blades, was a hulking, hunched figure almost completely obscured by a massive puppet that seemed to serve as both armor and a mobile workshop. A long, scorpion-like tail, dripping with a viscous purple liquid, twitched menacingly behind it. This was Sasori of the Red Sand, engrossed in the meticulous maintenance of his art. The scroll they had stolen from the auction lay open on the table, its complex Fuinjutsu diagrams already being integrated into a new, horrifying puppet arm. The cursed seal formula is fascinating, Sasori's voice rasped from within the puppet, a dry, impatient sound. But Orochimaru's methods were so imprecise. All that reliance on the host's emotional state. True art is eternal, a perfect form that can deliver its payload with cold, mechanical efficiency. TCH. Eternal art is boring art, Master Sasori, Deidara countered without looking up. The ultimate beauty is fleeting, a single, brilliant flash of destructive power that sears itself into the memory of the beholder. An explosion. Yeah. They were so engrossed in their work, so confident in their impenetrable fortress, that they hadn't yet sensed the three figures watching from the shadows of the entrance tunnel. Jiraiya gave a subtle hand signal. Sasuke, Naruto, you take the bomber. I'll handle the puppet master. On my mark. Naruto and Sasuke nodded in perfect sync. Jiraiya stepped out of the shadows. I've always found that the best art inspires, not destroys, he said, his voice booming in the vast cavern. But I suppose that's a matter of taste. Sasori and Deidara froze. Deidara spun around, a look of shocked annoyance on his face. Intruders? How? The barrier, Sasori's puppet, Hiruko, creaked as it turned, a dozen hidden blades emerging from its shell. It doesn't matter how they got in, the puppet master's voice rasped. They are not leaving. The battle began without another word. Jiraiya shot forward, a massive Rasengan already in his hand, aimed not at Hiruko, but at the workbench, intending to destroy the cursed seal scroll. Sasori reacted instantly, Hiruko's massive scorpion tail lashing out, not with its poisoned stinger, but with a volley of senbone that forced Jiraiya to abandon his attack and dodge. At the same moment, Deidara laughed, a wild, manic sound. So, you want to experience my art firsthand? Then have a taste. Katsu. He tossed a handful of his clay spiders, which scurried across the floor before detonating in a series of powerful, focused explosions. But Naruto and Sasuke were already moving. Sasuke, his Chidori screaming, didn't attack Deidara. He slammed his hand into the stone floor. Chidori stream. A web of pure lightning shot across the cavern floor. It wasn't meant to harm Deidara, but to neutralize his creations. The clay bombs, infused with his chakra, were short-circuited by the lightning, fizzling out uselessly. An art critic, are you? Yeah, Deidara sneered, leaping into the air to avoid the electrical current. He reached into his pouches, pulling out more clay. You're not fighting him alone. Naruto appeared beside Sasuke, having moved with a speed that was almost impossible to track. He entered Sage mode in an instant, the orange pigmentation flaring around his eyes. Let's see how your art holds up against this. The two of them shot towards Deidara, a synchronized assault of Sage-enhanced taijutsu and Sharingan-guided precision. Naruto's frog kata allowed him to attack from a distance, sending shockwaves of natural energy that forced Deidara to stay airborne. Sasuke, meanwhile, used his fire style to detonate Deidara clay birds prematurely, his Sharingan predicting their flight paths with perfect accuracy. "You're annoying. Both of you, Deidara yelled, weaving through their attacks on a massive clay bird he had created. He was on the defensive, his art form being systematically deconstructed and countered by their perfect teamwork. Meanwhile, Jiraiya's battle with Sasori was a clash of titans. Hiruko was a fortress, its armored shell deflecting Jiraiya's taijutsu, its hidden mechanisms unleashing a constant barrage of poison weapons. "You are a relic, Sanin," Sasori's voice echoed from within the puppet. "Your flesh is weak. Your jutsu are outdated. You cannot hope to defeat a master of puppetry." "Puppets are just dolls, kid," Jiraiya retorted, dodging a spray of poison gas. "And I've been breaking dolls since before you were born." He slammed his hands on the ground. Summoning jutsu. With a massive puff of smoke, Gamabunta, the chief of the Toads, appeared, his massive frame filling a third of the cavern, his tanto blade scraping against the stone ceiling. "Jiraiya. You summoned me to this cramped, dusty hole?" The boss toad grumbled. "This better be good. Just a little pest control, Bunta," Jiraiya yelled, pointing to Hiruko. "Squash him." The cavern had become a raging battlefield, a chaotic symphony of explosions, lightning, poison, and the clash of legendary summons. Task Force Hurricane was fully engaged with two of the Akatsuki's most dangerous members, and the battle for Orochimaru's legacy had just begun. "A toad? How crude," Sasori's voice rasped from within his puppet shell. "A creature of flesh and blood has no place in a battle of art." "We'll see about that," Gamabunta roared, bringing his massive tanto blade down in a crushing arc. Hiruko scuttled backwards with surprising speed, the toad's blade shattering the stone floor where it had been standing. "Bunta, oil and fire," Jiraiya commanded from his perch on the toad's head. "You got it." Gamabunta inhaled deeply and spat a massive torrent of thick, flammable toad oil. "Sage art, fire style, flame bullet." Jiraiya followed up, spitting a small, Senjutsu-enhanced fireball into the oil. The combination was devastating. A tidal wave of roaring flame washed through the cavern, turning a huge section of it into a raging inferno. From within the flames, Hiruko's tail shot out, not at Gamabunta, but at the ceiling. It latched on, and the puppet pulled itself from the fire, its wooden shell scorched and smoking. "Impressive," Sasori's voice echoed, devoid of any emotion. "You have forced me to abandon my favorite shell. It has been a long time since anyone has done that." The burning shell of Hiruko cracked open, and a new figure emerged, landing lightly on the cavern floor. It was a young man with red hair and wide, vacant eyes, his body strangely jointed like a doll's. This was Sasori's true form, a human puppet. "Now," Sasori said, his own voice now clear and sharp, "let me show you some of my true collection. My masterpiece." He produced a scroll. With a surge of chakra, he unsealed it, and with another massive puff of smoke, a new figure appeared. It was a massive, imposing man with long dark hair and a stern, powerful face. Jiraiya's eyes widened in horror and recognition. "No. It can't be." Gamabunta gasped. "That's the third Kazekage. The strongest in the history of the sand." "Sasori, you bastard. You turned him into one of your puppets?" "The strongest Kazekage makes for the strongest puppet," Sasori stated calmly. His iron sand ability was a work of art. "And now, it is mine to command. Hold still so I can blow you up." Deidara screamed from atop his clay bird, dodging another invisible punch from Naruto's frog kata. "You'll have to be faster than that," Naruto yelled back, his sage-enhanced senses tracking Deidara every move. "Your flight path is getting sloppy." "Sasuke, now. Box him in," Naruto commanded. "On it," Sasuke replied, his Sharingan spinning. Fire style, great fireball jutsu. He didn't aim at Deidara, but at the air around him, creating a massive, expanding sphere of flame that limited Deidara escape routes. "A cage of fire? A pathetic trick, yeah," Deidara sneered. He guided his bird into a steep dive, flying under the fireball. "That's not a cage," Naruto said with a grin. "It's a distraction." As Deidara flew under the fireball, he came face to face with a dozen Naruto clones, each one holding a fully formed Rasengan. They had been created in the shadow of Sasuke's attack, their presence masked by the intense heat. "What?" Deidara shrieked. "Sage art, Rasengan super barrage." The clones roared in unison. There was no escape. The wave of spiraling chakra slammed into Datara and his clay bird. The bird disintegrated, and Datara himself was sent tumbling through the air, his Akatsuki cloak torn to shreds, his body battered. He crashed to the ground, coughing and bruised. You brats. You think you've won? You haven't even seen my true art. He struggled to his feet, a wild, manic grin spreading across his face. He reached for a hidden pouch on his chest. You have pushed me. You have forced my hand. Now, witness the ultimate expression of a fleeting moment. My C4 Karura. He began to knead a massive amount of clay with the mouth on his chest, his chakra flaring to an incredible degree. Naruto, get back, Sasuke yelled, his Sharingan seeing the sheer density of the chakra being formed. That's not a normal bomb. He's creating something on a microscopic level. Too late. Datara cackled. My art will be imprinted on your very cells as you disintegrate. Now, breathe deep and appreciate true beauty. Katsu. He threw the massive clay sculpture into the air, and it began to expand, taking the shape of a colossal, monstrous version of himself. The giant clay Datara then burst, not in a fiery explosion, but into a cloud of countless, invisible nanobombs that began to spread rapidly through the cavern. The final, deadly exhibition of the artist's power had begun. Iron Sand, World Order, Sasori commanded. The third Kazekage puppet raised its hands, and the floor of the cavern erupted. The iron-rich dust and stone of the mountain itself rose into the air, coalescing into a massive, swirling tsunami of black sand, filled with razor-sharp spikes and blades. Bunta, get us out of here, Jiraiya yelled. The boss toad leapt backwards, narrowly avoiding being engulfed by the wave of iron. This is bad, Jiraiya, Gamabunta roared. That sand is denser than rock. My water bullets won't be enough. Then we'll have to melt it, Jiraiya declared. Pa, we've got no choice. We're using that. Fukasaku and Shima, perched on his shoulders, nodded grimly. It will take time to prepare, Jiraiya boy. You must buy us that time. I know. Jiraiya leapt from Gamabunta's head, landing in front of the advancing iron tide. I'll give you all the time you need. He's filled the entire cavern with them, Sasuke shouted, his Sharingan allowing him to see the terrifying reality of Datara C4. The air was thick with microscopic bombs, a silent, invisible cloud of death. If we breathe, we die. Then we won't breathe, Naruto said, his sage mode senses giving him a different perspective. He could feel each individual nanobomb, a cloud of buzzing, malevolent chakra. And we won't let him breathe either. What's the plan? Sasuke asked, holding his breath, his body tense. I'll collect the trash, Naruto said, a grim smile on his face. You take out the garbage man. Naruto took a deep breath and held it. He clapped his hands together. Sage art, great wind vortex. He didn't create a cutting wind. He created a vacuum. A massive, swirling vortex of air centered on himself, sucking in everything around it. The air in the cavern rushed towards him, and with it, the cloud of C4 nanobombs. He wasn't just inhaling them, he was containing them within a spinning, compressed sphere of wind in front of him. Datara stared, his eyes wide with disbelief. He's controlling them? Impossible, Now, Sasuke, Naruto yelled, his voice strained as he maintained the vortex. Sasuke didn't need to be told twice. With the air rushing past him towards Naruto, he moved. He was a black blur, his Chidori screaming to life in his hand. Datara, caught off guard by the sheer audacity of their strategy, couldn't react in time. Sasuke appeared in front of him. This is the end of your art, he said, his voice cold. He thrust the Chidori forward, not at Datara's heart, but at his arms. The lightning blade was not a spear, but a scalpel. With two precise, blindingly fast movements, Sasuke severed the chakra pathways leading to the mouths on Datara's hands, rendering them useless. My hands. My art. What did you do, yeah? Datara shrieked, stumbling back in pain and shock. I disarmed you, Sasuke stated flatly. Naruto, seeing his foe neutralized, thrust his hands forward, sending the contained sphere of C4 and wind careening up towards the ceiling of the cavern. Sasuke, shield. Sasuke, already moving, slammed his hands on the ground, creating a thick dome of earth to protect them. The C4 detonated in the contained vortex, a massive, silent implosion that shook the very foundations of the mountain. As the dust settled on their side of the cavern, Jiraiya faced the full fury of the iron sand. The third Kazekage puppet was relentless, sending waves of razor-sharp spikes and blades at him. It's ready, Jiraiya boy. Fukasaku croaked. Finally, Jiraiya roared. Sage art, bath of boiling oil. He spat a torrent of toad oil, not at the puppet, but at the entire area around it. Shima followed up with a massive wind jutsu, whipping the oil into a frenzy, while Fukasaku unleashed a fire jutsu of incredible intensity. The three techniques combined, amplified by Senjutsu, created a superheated, swirling vortex of flame and oil that flash melted the iron sand into molten slag and incinerated the Kazekage puppet, destroying Sasori's masterpiece. Sasori stared, his puppet body trembling with rage. My art. My eternal beauty. Ruined. It's over, Sasori, Jiraiya said calmly, landing before him. You have nothing left to fight with. From across the cavern, a battered Deidara looked at his defeated partner, then at the two young shinobi who had so thoroughly dismantled his art. Master Sasori, he called out, his voice tight with humiliation. The data is clear. We cannot win this. We must retreat. Sasori was silent for a moment, his vacant puppet eyes staring at the molten remains of his greatest creation. Agreed, he finally rasped. This mission is a failure. The Jinchuriki and the Uchiha. They are more than the files suggested. He slammed his hand on the ground, and a hidden mechanism in his puppet body activated. A massive cloud of thick, purple poison gas erupted from him, blanketing the entire cavern. Don't breathe it in, Jiraiya yelled, leaping back alongside Naruto and Sasuke. When the gas cleared moments later, the two Akatsuki members were gone, having vanished into a hidden tunnel. The scroll containing Orochimaru's research was also gone, taken in the chaos. The battle was over. Naruto and Sasuke stood amidst the rubble, panting but victorious. Jiraiya dismissed a weary game of Banta and walked over to them. They got away, Sasuke growled, frustrated. And they got the scroll, Jiraiya added, his expression grim. But we got something more valuable. What's that? Naruto asked. A clear victory, Jiraiya said, a slow grin spreading across his face. We met two of their strongest members head on and sent them running with their tails between their legs. They know what we're capable of now. And we have invaluable combat data on them. He clapped them both on the shoulder. But most importantly, we're alive. He looked around the ruined cavern, then towards the tunnel they had entered. Our work here is done. We've pushed them back, and we've learned what we needed to. It's time to go home. Chapter 6, The Return of the Hurricane. The journey from the jagged peaks of the land of Earth was a long, quiet march. The adrenaline of battle had faded, leaving behind the grim reality of their mission's outcome. They had won a decisive victory, proving their strength against two of the Akatsuki's most formidable members, but their primary objective, retrieving the scroll of Orochimaru's research, had been a failure. The enemy had escaped, armed with new, dangerous knowledge. The mood was somber. Jiraiya, foregoing his usual boisterousness, was lost in thought, processing the implications of the Kazekage puppet and the sheer audacity of the Akatsuki's operations. Sasuke was a storm of silent frustration, his Sharingan replaying every moment of the battle, analyzing every mistake, every missed opportunity. He had disarmed Deidara, yes, but the artist had still managed to escape. It was an imperfection he could not tolerate. Naruto was the calmest of the three, but it was a heavy, thoughtful calm. He walked, his sage-enhanced senses still faintly active, feeling the life of the world around him. He had faced his first true S-rank opponents and had not only survived but had dominated his side of the fight. He had proven the effectiveness of his training, the power of his partnership with Sasuke. But the victory felt incomplete. They're a network, Naruto said one night as they sat around a smokeless campfire, his voice breaking the long silence. The Akatsuki. They're not just a collection of powerful individuals. They're organized. They have resources, hideouts, and a clear command structure. And they're allied with what's left of Orochimaru's organization, Sasuke added, his voice a low growl. They're not just hunting Jinchuriki. They're consolidating power, absorbing the research and assets of anyone who can help them. Which means our mission has failed, Jiraiya stated bluntly. We set out to hunt the Serpent's Trail and cut off the Akatsuki. Instead, we've confirmed that the two have merged into a far greater threat. We're no longer just chasing ghosts, we're fighting a shadow government. He looked at the two young men before him. The boys he had taken from Konoha were gone, replaced by seasoned, powerful shinobi who had faced death and walked away stronger. The training trip is over, he said, his voice filled with a finality that resonated in the quiet night. We've learned all we can out here. The information we have is too valuable to sit on. The next stage of this war has to be fought from home. Their pace quickened. They were no longer a reconnaissance unit on a long-term mission, they were couriers, carrying the fate of the world in their minds. As they crossed the border back into the land of fire, the landscape softened. The harsh rock gave way to lush forests and rolling hills. The air grew warmer, thick with the familiar scent of home. After 3 long years, they were back. They didn't enter Konoha through the main gate. Jiraiya led them through a series of hidden, Anbu-patrolled tunnels that brought them directly into the heart of the village, bypassing any potential observers. The Konoha they emerged into was both the same and profoundly different. It was the village of their memories, but it felt stronger, more vibrant. The scars of Orochimaru's invasion had healed, replaced by new, sturdier construction. The people on the streets walked with a new sense of purpose, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there when they'd left. Their first stop was the Hokage Tower. As they walked through the corridors, shinobi turned and stared, their eyes widening in recognition. Whispers followed them. Is that? Jiraiya-sama has returned. And the Uchiha? And Uzumaki? They entered the Hokage's office without knocking. Tsunade sat behind the great desk, buried in a mountain of paperwork. She looked up, and for a moment, the weary, overworked leader vanished, replaced by a look of profound relief. Standing before her were not the two promising, but still raw, teenagers who had left 3 years ago. Sasuke was taller, his features sharper, his presence radiating a cold, controlled power. Naruto had shed the last of his boyishness, his shoulders broader, his gaze calm and deep, carrying the quiet, immense weight of the sage's wisdom. They were men. You're late, Tsunade said, though her voice held no admonishment. We ran into some trouble, Jiraiya said simply, placing a detailed mission report on her desk. As Tsunade read, her expression grew grimmer with each line. She read of the Mist Civil War, of the battle with the 4 pillars, of Yagura and the Man in the Mask. She read of the hunt for Orochimaru's labs, the discovery of the Uzumaki research, and the final, brutal confrontation with Sasori and Deidara. When she finished, she was silent for a long moment. So, the board is even more complicated than we feared, she said finally. The Akatsuki are not just collecting beasts, they're collecting weapons, jutsu, and allies. They're preparing for a full-scale war. She looked at Naruto and Sasuke. Your mission is complete. You have given this village the intelligence it needs to prepare for the coming storm. Welcome home, Naruto, Sasuke. As they were dismissed, 2 more figures were waiting for them outside the office. Kakashi leaned against the wall, his single eye crinkling into a smile that conveyed more than words ever could. And beside him stood Sakura. She was no longer the girl they had left behind. She stood tall, her pink hair cut shorter, her green eyes sharp and confident. She wore the standard Jonin vest, and her hands, held loosely at her sides, seemed to hum with a faint, green medical chakra. She was not just a medic, she was a master of the craft, a student of the 5th Hokage herself. The 4 of them stood there for a moment, a silent reunion in the quiet corridor. Team 7 was whole again. So, Kakashi said, his voice filled with a lazy pride. I hear you kids have been busy. Naruto grinned, a real, honest-to-goodness grin that hadn't reached his eyes in months. You have no idea, sensei. The training trip was over. The war was just beginning. But for the first time in 3 long years, they were all home, and they were ready to face it together. Team 7, reborn. The silence in the corridor was thick with 3 years of unspoken history. It was Sakura who broke it, a small, relieved laugh escaping her lips. You're both so tall, she said, the simple, honest observation cutting through the tension like a kunai. Naruto's serious demeanor finally cracked, replaced by a wide, familiar grin that seemed to light up the dim hallway. You're not so short yourself, Sakura-chan. And is that a Jonin vest I see? Looks like you didn't slack off. Someone had to keep up, she retorted, her eyes shining with confidence. Lady Tsunade is a demanding teacher. Kakashi's visible eye curved into a smile. She is. Sakura is our top medical nin now. Head of the hospital's surgical unit. Sasuke's gaze shifted from Naruto to Sakura, his Sharingan taking in the dense, perfectly controlled medical chakra humming around her hands. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. It was the highest praise he could offer, a silent recognition of her power. So, what's first? Naruto asked, looking at Kakashi. Are we pulling weeds? Painting fences? I hear Tora the cat has a new litter of demon kittens that need catching. The joke was so familiar, so much a part of their shared past, that they all let out a small laugh. For a moment, they were just kids again, a Jonin team back from a long mission. I think we can skip the D ranks, Kakashi said, his voice filled with a lazy pride. But I think a celebratory meal is in order. My treat. Ramen, Naruto declared, his grin widening. The steam rising from the bowls at Ichiraku Ramen was a familiar, welcome cloud. They sat at the counter, Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, and Kakashi, in that order, just as they always had. But the dynamic was different. The space between them was filled with a new, comfortable silence, the easy quiet of professionals who understood each other without needing words. "So," Tucci said, placing a massive bowl of miso pork ramen in front of Naruto. "The hero returns. This one's on the house." "Thanks, old man," Naruto said, already digging in. "So, the Miss Civil War," Kakashi said, his tone casual as he poked at his own noodles. "The report was thorough. But I'd like to hear it from you." For the next hour, they talked. Naruto and Sasuke recounted their journey, their voices low and measured. They spoke of the battle with the Akatsuki artists, the Fuinjutsu training, the horrors of Orochimaru's labs, and the final, desperate battle against Yagura. They spoke of Sage Mode, of Sasuke's perfected Sharingan, and of the man in the mask. Sakura and Kakashi listened, their expressions growing more serious with each revelation. Sakura, with her medical knowledge, understood the true horror of Orochimaru's experiments. Kakashi, with his Anbu past, understood the strategic implications of the Akatsuki's network. "And you?" Naruto asked, turning to Sakura. "What have you been up to, besides becoming the best medic in the world?" Sakura smiled. "Mostly learning to punch holes in mountains and trying to keep Lady Tsunade from gambling the village into bankruptcy." She held up her fist, and for a split second, a faint green aura of chakra enveloped it. "I've been working on my own form of chakra control. It's not as flashy as a Rasengan, but it gets the job done." Sasuke grunted, a flicker of respect in his eyes. He recognized the principle, the same precise chakra-controlled Tsunade used to achieve her monstrous strength. "The village is different," Kakashi added. "Stronger. Your actions in the mist have secured our eastern flank. The new alliance with Kiri has opened up new trade routes and intelligence channels. We're no longer isolated." Their meal was interrupted by an Anbu agent, appearing silently behind Kakashi. "Hokage-sama requests the presence of Team 7 in Briefing Room 1, the agent said, his voice a monotone. Immediately. The briefing room was stark and official. Tsunade stood before a massive map of the elemental nations, her expression grim. Jiraiya and Hiruzen Sarutobi stood beside her, along with the heads of the major clans. "Welcome back," Tsunade said, her voice all business. "Your timing is impeccable. We have a situation." She tapped a location on the map, a remote, mountainous region in the Land of Frost. 2 hours ago, our long-range sensory teams detected a massive chakra spike from this location. A level of energy consistent with a tailed beast release. "The two tails," Jiraiya murmured. "Yugito ni. A Jinchuriki from Amigakure." "Exactly," Tsunade confirmed. "Kumo has been silent. They haven't responded to our inquiries. We believe the Akatsuki have made their move." She looked at the four of them. "Normally, this would be an internal Kumo matter. But the intel you brought back changes things. The Akatsuki are not just collecting beasts, they are absorbing assets. We cannot allow them to secure another Jinchuriki and potentially another perfect host's abilities." "What's the mission?" Naruto asked, his voice calm and ready. "This is not a formal mission," Tsunade stated. "Konoha cannot officially intervene in the affairs of another hidden village. It would be an act of war. Team 7, however," she allowed a small, predatory smile to grace her lips, "is a newly reformed unit undergoing a field calibration test. If you happen to run into 2S rank criminals and neutralize them while you're out calibrating, well, accidents happen. It was a black operation, sanctioned at the highest level, with complete plausible deniability. The intel is clear," Tsunade continued. "The two Akatsuki members who attacked Yugito are a new team we haven't encountered before. One is a man named Hidan, a religious fanatic who is rumored to be immortal. The other is Kakuzu, a bounty hunter who has been alive since the time of the first Hokage, a man who fights with 5 separate hearts. The zombie combo," Jiraiya grunted. "A particularly nasty pair." "Your objective is simple," Tsunade said, her eyes locking with Naruto's. "Intercept and engage. Do not let them escape with the two tails. The full resources of the village's intelligence network are at your disposal. But once you cross that border, you are on your own." She looked at the four of them, the copy ninja, the master medic, the Uchiha prodigy, and the hurricane sage. It was, without a doubt, the most powerful 4-man cell in the history of the shinobi world. "Team 7 is officially reinstated," Tsunade declared. "Your test begins now. Move out. The Immortal and the Treasurer." There was no ceremony to their departure. One moment, Team 7 stood in the briefing room, the next, they were 4 blurs of motion, streaking through the forests of the Land of Fire at a speed that would have been unattainable 3 years ago. They moved as a single, cohesive unit, a diamond formation with Kakashi and Sasuke at the front and flanks, Sakura providing rear medical support, and Naruto at the center, acting as the nexus of their operation. "My clones are already ahead," Naruto's voice was a low, calm murmur, a stark contrast to the rushing wind. "They've established a relay network. We'll have real-time intel all the way to the border." "How far is their estimated lead?" Kakashi asked, his visible eye scanning the path ahead. 2 hours, maybe 3, Sasuke answered, his Sharingan active, processing the topographical data of the terrain. "But they're not moving at top speed. They're confident. Arrogant." "That will be their mistake," Sakura added, her voice firm. "Hidan's ritual requires him to stay within a specific seal. Kakuzu is a long-range fighter who uses his elemental masks. Their teamwork is powerful, but it has exploitable weaknesses." Her 3 years under Tsunade had not just been about medicine, she had become a master of battlefield analysis, capable of deconstructing an opponent's fighting style from a single intelligence report. They crossed the border into the Land of Frost 12 hours later. The landscape transformed into a stark, beautiful world of snow-covered pines and frozen waterfalls. The air was thin and bitingly cold. "I have a visual," Naruto said suddenly, his eyes closed in concentration, the orange pigmentation of sage mode flaring for a brief moment. "Not a visual. A feeling. A battle. 2 massive chakra signatures against one that's like mine." "Where?" Kakashi commanded. "A frozen lake, 5 miles northeast, surrounded by ice pillars," Naruto reported. "The Two Tails is already fully released. She's fighting for her life." "Let's move," Kakashi ordered. "This is no longer an intercept mission. It's a rescue." They arrived at the edge of the frozen lake to a scene of elemental chaos. A colossal, phantom-like cat made of pure blue and black flame, the Two Tails, Matatabi, was locked in a desperate battle with 2 figures. One, a man with silver hair slicked back and a manic grin, swung a massive, 3-bladed scythe on a long cable, his movements wild and unpredictable. This was Hidan. The other, a taller, masked figure, stood back, directing 4 monstrous, masked creatures that were unleashing a relentless barrage of wind, fire, and lightning jutsu. This was Kakuzu. The Jinchuriki, Yugito ni, was a master of her tailed beast. She moved with a fluid, feline grace, her fiery claws tearing through Kakuzu's elemental beasts, her speed making her a difficult target for Hidan's wide, sweeping attacks. She was a proud, powerful warrior, a perfect Jinchuriki holding her own against 2 of the Akatsuki's most dangerous members. "She's good," Sasuke noted, his Sharingan analyzing the flow of the battle. "She's keeping them separated, preventing them from coordinating their attacks." "But she can't win," Sakura added, her medical eye seeing the truth. "Her chakra is immense, but it's finite. They just keep getting back up." As if to prove her point, Yugito unleashed a massive fire blast that completely incinerated one of Kakuzu's masks. The creature fell, but from Kakuzu's back, another mask detached and floated forward, its elemental power undiminished. Hidan, meanwhile, was caught by a swipe from a flaming tail that should have torn him in half. He was sent flying, crashing into an ice pillar, but he stood up a moment later, laughing, his body knitting itself back together. "This pain is exquisite." Hidan cackled. "A sacrifice worthy of Lord Jashin." "Stop playing with your food, Hidan," Kakuzu's voice rasped, a sound like grinding stones. "The client wants her alive, if possible. Finish the ritual." Hidan licked a drop of Yugito's blood from his scythe. He quickly drew a circle on the ice with his own blood and stepped inside. His skin turned a deathly black with white, skeletal markings. "Now," he grinned, "we are one. Let us share the ultimate pain." He thrust his own retractable spear into his chest. Miles away, Yugito screamed, a pained, agonized roar as a phantom wound appeared on her own massive, fiery body. The ritual was complete. She was trapped. "Now," Kakashi said, his voice cold as the ice around them. Team 7 exploded into action. It was not a chaotic charge. It was a perfectly executed, 4-pronged assault. Kakashi appeared directly in front of Kakuzu, his hand already crackling with lightning. Reikiri. Sakura, moving with a speed that belied her role as a medic, appeared beside the writhing Yugito. "Do not worry," she said, her hands glowing with a gentle, powerful green. "I will stabilize your chakra." She placed her palms on the fiery beast, and her medical ninjutsu, amplified by her own monstrous strength, began to counteract the effects of Hidan's curse. Sasuke, a black blur, shot past them all, his target not Hidan, but the rope connecting him to his scythe. With a single, precise slash of his chokudo, he severed the connection. And Naruto? Naruto appeared directly in front of the stunned Hidan. He stood outside the ritual circle, his arms crossed, his expression calm. A ritual that requires your opponent's blood and for you to stand in a specific spot? Naruto said, his voice a quiet, analytical murmur. Interesting. But it has a few critical weaknesses. Hidan stared at him, his manic grin faltering. Who the hell are you? I'm the guy who's about to teach you about the flaw in your religion, Naruto said. He entered sage mode in an instant. He didn't form a Rasengan. He simply stomped his foot. Sage art, earth style, erupting spears. The frozen lake beneath Hidan's ritual circle exploded upwards. A dozen massive, razor-sharp pillars of ice and rock erupted, shattering the blood-drawn seal and launching the immortal fanatic into the air, separating him from his only source of power. At the same moment, Yugito, freed from the curse by Sakura's intervention and the breaking of the seal, let out a roar of pure, unadulterated fury. She looked at the Konoha shinobi who had just saved her, then at Naruto, who stood before her, his sage-infused chakra a beacon of calm, immense power. She saw not an enemy, not a rival Jinchuriki, but an ally. A kindred spirit. She didn't speak. She simply nodded at him, a silent acknowledgement passing between the two-tailed beast's vessels. Kakuzu. Hidan screamed as he fell. Get me down from here. You're on your own, the treasurer rasped, as he faced down Kakashi and a newly arrived Sasuke. You've already cost me one heart today. I'm not losing another. The frozen lake became a battlefield of two fronts. On one side, Hidan, tumbling through the air, screamed blasphemies at the sky. On the other, Kakuzu stood impassive, a living fortress facing down two of Konoha's finest. So, the great Kakashi of the Sharingan, Kakuzu's voice rasped, devoid of any urgency. Your head carries a high price in the bingo books. And the last Uchiha. Even higher. This has become a profitable day. You talk a lot for a man who just abandoned his partner, Kakashi said, his reikiri dissipating as he settled into a low crouch. Hidan is a tool, Kakuzu stated flatly. An effective one for capturing Jinchuriki, but noisy and inefficient. His value has depreciated. He gestured, and his three remaining elemental beasts spread out, flanking him. A wind mask, a fire mask, and a lightning mask. Now, let's discuss the terms of your liquidation. Sasuke didn't speak. His Sharingan spun, analyzing the flow of chakra between Kakuzu and his strange familiars. They aren't summons, he murmured to Kakashi. They're external hearts. He's not controlling them, they're a part of him. Then we'll just have to tear him apart, piece by piece, Kakashi replied, his voice grim. The three beasts attacked as one. A massive torrent of flame, a cutting gale of wind, and a barrage of lightning bolts converged on their position. Across the lake, the colossal form of Matatabi began to shrink, the blue-black flames receding into the form of a woman with long, straight blonde hair, bound in intricate wrappings. Yugito knee collapsed to her knees on the ice, panting, her body still smoking with residual chakra. Sakura was instantly at her side, her hands glowing. Your chakra pathways are in chaos from the curse, Sakura said, her voice calm and professional. Hold still. I'm going to reset them. Naruto landed lightly on the ice in front of them, his sage mode still active. He turned his attention to the falling Hidan. You bastard! Hidan shrieked, twisting in midair. When I get down there, I'm going to sacrifice all of you. It will be the most glorious festival of pain. You're not getting down here, Naruto said calmly. He created a single shadow clone. Together, they formed a Rasengan, but it wasn't the massive, destructive Odama version. It was small, dense, and perfectly controlled. The clone threw Naruto into the air with a powerful heave. Naruto shot upwards like a cannonball, meeting the falling Hidan halfway. He didn't slam the Rasengan into him. He simply pressed it against Hidan's chest. You're immortal, Naruto said, his voice a quiet murmur against the wind. You can't be killed. But you can be disassembled. He unleashed the Rasengan. It didn't explode. It ground, a vortex of pure chakra that shredded Hidan's Akatsuki cloak and began to pulverize the flesh and bone beneath it. Hidan's screams were drowned out by the sound of the jutsu. When Naruto pulled back, Hidan's torso was a mangled ruin. He was still alive, still conscious, but his body was ruined, his limbs flailing uselessly. He fell to the ice below in a broken heap, his curses turning into pained, gurgling moans. Naruto landed beside him. Sakura-chan, a little help? Sakura, having stabilized Yugito, looked over. What do you need? How good is your knowledge of anatomy? Naruto asked. I can name every bone, muscle, and nerve in the human body, she replied without hesitation. Perfect, Naruto said with a grim smile. I need you to tell my clones exactly where to cut. A dozen clones appeared, each holding a small, sharp blade of wind chakra. They surrounded the writhing, cursing Hidan. This is sacrilege. Hidan shrieked. Lord Jashin will smite you. Tell him I said hi, Naruto said flatly. Start with the ligaments. Yugito watched, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and grudging respect. She had fought for hours, and this boy had dismantled one of her opponents in less than a minute with cold, tactical brutality. She pushed herself to her feet, her pride as a Kumo Jonin stinging more than her injuries. I did not require your assistance, she said, her voice proud and sharp, though it lacked its earlier fire. Naruto turned to face her, his sage mode receding, leaving only his calm, blue eyes. I know, he said simply. You were holding your own. But my mission was to prevent the Akatsuki from capturing you. Allowing them to wear you down would have been a mission failure. His directness took her aback. There was no arrogance in his tone, no condescension. It was the simple, logical assessment of a fellow professional. You are the Nine Tails Jinchuriki, she stated, feeling the faint, familiar resonance between them. And you are the Two Tails, he replied. It's nice to meet someone who gets it. That simple phrase, who gets it, struck a chord deep within her. The loneliness of her position, the fear and awe she inspired in her own comrades, the constant weight of the beast within, he understood it all without needing it to be explained. Why help Kumo? She asked, her voice softening slightly. Our villages have been rivals for decades. Because the Akatsuki are a threat to everyone, Naruto said. And because leaving a comrade to fight a battle they can't win isn't the Konoha way. He looked at her, a small, genuine smile touching his lips. Besides, I couldn't let them mess up a fellow cat lover. Yugito stared at him, a faint blush rising on her cheeks at the unexpected, slightly goofy comment. He was a paradox, a warrior of terrifying power and a boy with a disarmingly simple kindness. Their conversation was cut short by a massive explosion from the other side of the lake. Looks like they're having fun, Naruto said, his expression turning serious again. Let's go give them a hand. He's analyzing my every move, Sasuke yelled, leaping back as Kakuzu's wind mask unleashed a barrage of compressed air bullets that shredded the ice where he'd been standing. He's not just analyzing, Kakashi corrected, dodging a massive fireball. He's adapting. His hearts work in concert. They learn. Kakuzu stood impassively, his arms crossed, letting his elemental beasts do the work. It is useless. I have fought shinobi from every nation. I have battled the first Hokage himself. You are nothing new. Is that so? A new voice said. Kakuzu spun around. Naruto stood behind him, his arms crossed. To his left stood Sasuke, his Chidori crackling. To his right stood Kakashi, his Reikiri humming. And behind them, Sakura stood with Yugito, who was now wreathed in a controlled, less intense version of her blue-black flames. Team 7 and their new ally had formed a circle around him. 5 cage-level opponents, Kakuzu's voice rasped, a flicker of something that might have been surprise in his tone. The bounty on this single battle will be legendary. The only one getting paid today is me, Naruto said. He held up his hand, and a Rasen Shuriken shrieked to life, its sound tearing at the very air. And I'm collecting your hearts. Kakuzu's impassive mask didn't betray any emotion, but the chakra emanating from his 4 remaining hearts flared with agitation. A big threat from a little boy. Your bravado is meaningless. It's not bravado, Naruto replied, his voice calm, the shrieking of the Rasen Shuriken in his hand the only sign of the power he was wielding. It's a statement of fact. Sasuke, Yugito-san, coordinated fire, Kakashi commanded, taking charge. Force him to combine his masks. Sakura, be ready for anything. Naruto, on my signal. There was no hesitation. Sasuke's hands flew through seals. Fire style, Great Dragon Fire Jutsu. A massive, dragon-headed torrent of flame erupted towards Kakuzu. Simultaneously, Yugito unleashed her own attack. Cat Fireball, she spat a series of smaller, faster fireballs of blue-black flame that moved like homing missiles, cutting off Kakuzu's escape routes. Futile, Kakuzu rasped. His wind and fire masks flew in front of him. Wind style, pressure damage. Fire style, searing migraine. The 2 elemental attacks combined. The wind jutsu fanned Sasuke's and Yugito's flames into a colossal, uncontrolled firestorm that raged across the ice, obscuring vision and creating a wall of heat. He used our own jutsu against us to create a smokescreen, Kakashi yelled. I can see him, Sasuke stated, his Sharingan piercing the inferno. He's consolidating. The masks are returning to his body. He's preparing for a close-range assault, Naruto analyzed, his sage mode senses feeling the shift in chakra. He knows he can't win a long-range battle against this many opponents. As the firestorm died down, Kakuzu stood in the center of a blackened crater, the masks gone, his body stitched together with thick black threads. He looked whole. It has been a long time since I have had to take a fight seriously, he said, his voice a low growl. You should be honored. He shot forward, his speed monstrous, his arm extending, wrapped in the black threads, aiming to impale Kakashi. My turn, Sakura roared. She appeared in front of Kakashi, her fist cocked back. Cherry blossom clash. She didn't punch Kakuzu. She punched the ice. The entire frozen lake shattered. A massive shockwave erupted from her fist, sending a tidal wave of ice shards and freezing water directly at Kakuzu, disrupting his attack and forcing him to leap back. Impressive strength for a medic, Kakuzu noted, landing lightly. Now, Naruto, Kakashi yelled. Naruto was already moving. He shot across the shattered ice, the Rasen Shuriken in his hand screaming like a banshee. Kakuzu's body hardened, his earth-style, earth spear jutsu turning his skin as hard as diamond. He braced for the impact, confident in his ultimate defense. But Naruto didn't aim for his body. At the last possible second, he altered the trajectory of the attack, slamming the Rasen Shuriken into the ice directly at Kakuzu's feet. The result was not an explosion. It was an annihilation. The microscopic wind blades didn't just shatter the ice, they tore it apart on a cellular level, creating a massive, expanding sphere of destruction. Kakuzu's earth spear defense, designed to stop direct physical and chakra attacks, was useless against the very ground he was standing on being unmade beneath him. He was thrown into the air, his body battered, his ultimate defense shattered. He was vulnerable. Sasuke, Naruto commanded. Sasuke was already there, appearing above the airborne Kakuzu, his hand crackling with a refined, Senjutsu-enhanced Chidori. This is for the bounty, he said, his voice cold. He thrust his hand forward. The Chidori pierced Kakuzu's chest, the lightning amplified by Sage Chakra, short-circuiting not just one heart, but the entire chakra network that connected them. Kakuzu's ancient body convulsed, the black threads that held him together snapping and dissolving. His 4 remaining hearts, deprived of their connection, sputtered and died. The ancient shinobi, who had lived for nearly a century, fell from the sky in pieces, his long life of greed and violence ending in a silent, frozen wasteland. As the dust settled, Naruto walked back over to the other side of the lake, where his clones were methodically finishing their work on Hidan. Guided by Sakura's precise instructions, they had severed every ligament, every muscle, and every nerve. Hidan was now little more than a collection of still living, blaspheming body parts. What do we do with him? Sakura asked, looking at the gruesome scene with a clinical detachment. Immortality is a curse if you have nothing to live for, Naruto said. He stomped his foot on the ice. Sage art, earthen prison. A deep, dark chasm opened in the frozen lake. The clones, without a word, kicked the various pieces of Hidan into the hole. You can't do this. Hidan's head shrieked as it tumbled into the darkness. Lord Jashin will save me. I will return. I will know eternal life. You're right, Naruto said, looking down into the chasm. You will. He made a single hand seal, and the chasm sealed shut, the earth closing over Hidan, burying him alive under 1,000 tons of rock and ice. He would spend his eternity in the cold, silent, crushing dark, a fate far worse than any death. The battle was over. 2 of the Akatsuki's most feared members had been permanently removed from the board. Yugito ni walked over to Naruto, her expression one of profound awe and gratitude. You, Konoha. You have given Kumo a great gift today. A debt of this magnitude. It cannot be easily repaid. No debt, Naruto said, finally letting his sage mode fade, a wave of exhaustion washing over him. Just tell your Raikage that the world is changing. And it's time for the hidden villages to start acting like neighbors, not rivals. He looked at his team, at Kakashi, Sasuke, and Sakura, all battered but standing strong. They had done it. They had faced the immortal and the treasurer, and they had won. Kakashi clapped him on the shoulder. Well, he said, his visible eye crinkling into a tired smile. I think this field calibration test was a success. Let's go home and file the report. The return of Team 7 to Konoha was not marked by parades or public commendations. It was a quiet, almost secret affair. They slipped back into the village as they had left it, as shadows, carrying intelligence that would shift the balance of power in the brewing global war. The weight of their victory in the Land of Frost was a heavy, sobering thing, a grim testament to the escalating stakes. Their debriefing with Tsunade was held in the Anbu headquarters' most secure tactical room, a windowless chamber of cold stone designed to be impervious to any form of eavesdropping. Jiraiya, Kakashi, and the 3 younger members of the team stood before the 5th Hokage, the air thick with the unspoken gravity of their report. They have been neutralized, Kakashi stated, his voice a flat, official monotone as he concluded their report. Hidan is permanently incapacitated and buried in a sealed location within the Land of Frost. Kakuzu is confirmed deceased, all 5 hearts destroyed. The Two-Tails Jinchuriki, Yugito ni, is secure and has returned to Amigakure with a full report for the Reikage. Tsunade leaned forward, her hands steepled on the table, her gaze intense. And the cost? Minimal, Sakura answered, her voice crisp and professional. Yugito-san sustained significant chakra pathway damage from Hidan's curse, but I was able to stabilize and fully repair the network. Our team sustained only minor injuries, all of which have been treated. Tsunade's eyes lingered on Naruto. And you? The report states you used Sage Mode extensively and neutralized Hidan with a Rasengan. No backlash? The technique was controlled, Naruto replied simply. There was no cellular damage. It was a testament to his mastery over the past 3 years. The suicidal power of the Rasen Shuriken had been refined into a precision instrument. This is a monumental victory, Hiruzen Sarutobi said, stepping out of the shadows where he had been observing. His presence as an advisor lent a historical weight to the proceedings. In a single operation, you have eliminated 2 of the Akatsuki's most durable members and forged a potential alliance with Kumo, a village that has been our rival for a century. The strategic implications are staggering. But the war is far from over, Jiraiya countered, his expression grim. The Akatsuki now know our full strength. They know Naruto and Sasuke have surpassed the level of average S-rank shinobi. They know we can counter their most esoteric abilities. They will adapt. Their next move will be more direct, more powerful. He looked at Tsunade. They will come for Naruto. Not with hunters, but with gods. The statement hung in the air, a chilling prophecy. In the days that followed, a new rhythm settled over Konoha. The village, now armed with the hard-won intelligence from Team 7, began to move onto a war footing. Patrols were strengthened, the sensory barrier was enhanced, and a new joint intelligence division was formed between the Anbu and Jiraiya's spy network, with Shikaku Nara at its head, tasked with a single objective: predict the Akatsuki's next move. For Team 7, it was a period of strange, tense peace. They were heroes, but their victory was a state secret. To the village, they were simply a Jonin team that had returned from a long-term training mission. But among the upper echelons of the shinobi forces, their status was legendary. Sasuke spent his days in the Uchiha clan's archives, a place he had once avoided as a tomb of painful memories. Now, it was a library, a source of power. He pored over ancient scrolls, not just learning new fire jutsu, but studying the history of the Mangekyo Sharingan. He read of the legends, of Madara, of Izuna, and of the terrible price required to unlock that power, the death of one's closest friend. The knowledge settled in his gut like a cold stone. He looked at Naruto, his rival, his partner, the only person who could truly understand the stratosphere of power he now occupied, and he felt a new, terrifying conflict. To achieve his ultimate goal of killing Itachi, the path seemed to demand the ultimate betrayal. It was a flawed, contradictory equation, and his logical mind railed against it. There had to be another way. Sakura, in turn, became a pillar of the Konoha Medical Corps. She was no longer just Tsunade's apprentice, she was her heir apparent. She revolutionized their triage protocols, developed new antidotes based on the data from Sasori's poisons, and her chakra-enhanced strength became a legendary tool in the operating room, allowing her to set bones and perform surgeries with a precision no other medic could match. She was forging her own path to power, one built not on destruction, but on preservation. Naruto, however, found himself adrift. The constant motion of the training trip, the clear objectives of the missions, were gone. He was home, but the quiet was unsettling. He spent his days in training, but the exercises felt hollow. He had mastered Sage Mode, perfected the Rasen Shuriken, but Kurama's words echoed in his mind: true power comes from perfect, absolute control. He sought out the one person who might understand the philosophical weight of his power, Hiruzen Sarutobi. He found the old man in his private study, surrounded by books and the fragrant smoke of his pipe. I can defeat any enemy, Naruto began without preamble, sitting opposite the retired Hokage. I can level a mountain. I can end a war. But what comes next? Hiruzen looked at the young man before him, seeing not the Jonin, not the Jinchuriki, but the boy who had once been so desperate for acknowledgement. That, Naruto-kun, he said gently, is the question every Kage must ask themselves. Power is a tool to achieve peace, but peace itself is a far more difficult jutsu to master. It requires patience, understanding, and the wisdom to know when not to fight. He gestured to the village outside the window. You have the strength to protect them. Now, you must learn the wisdom to lead them. To inspire them. Your father was a genius of speed. He could end a battle in a flash. But his true strength was his ability to make people believe in him, to follow him. That is the final stage of your training. The words resonated with Naruto, planting a new seed in his ever-analytical mind. His objective had always been to get stronger. But strength was just a means to an end. The true goal was peace. And that required a different kind of power altogether. Far away, in a chamber hidden by rain and shadow, the holographic forms of the Akatsuki flickered into existence. The mood was grim. The empty slots where Hidan and Kakuzu once stood were a glaring testament to their recent failures. The Nine Tails Jinchuriki and his Uchiha compatriot have become a significant obstacle, the calm, resonant voice of Pain stated. His image, the Deva Path with its Rinnegan eyes, surveyed the remaining members. They have dismantled 2 of our members and liberated 2-tailed beasts from our grasp. Their growth rate is problematic. They were just brats. It was a fluke. Zetsu's white half chirped. They got lucky, the black half growled. It was not luck, a new voice said. A figure wearing a swirling orange mask stepped forward from the shadows. It was Toby, the group's newest, most enigmatic member. It was the result of Jiraiya's training, the power of the sage, and the unpredictable nature of the Nine Tails vessel. He looked at Pain. We have underestimated him. We cannot afford to do so again. Pain was silent for a moment, his Rinnegan eyes seeming to see through time and space. The plan remains the same. The collection of the tailed beasts will continue. But the priority has shifted. He turned his gaze to the holographic form of Itachi Uchiha. Itachi. Kisame. Your hunt for the 4 tails is postponed. Your new target is the 9 tails. Kisame grinned, his sharp teeth gleaming. It will be a pleasure to gut the little fish. Itachi, however, remained silent, his face an unreadable mask. But you will not engage him directly, Pain continued, his voice leaving no room for argument. Your mission is to draw him out. To lead him away from Konoha's protection. Lead him to Amigakure. He has become too powerful to be captured by conventional means. I will deal with him myself. The order was given. The most powerful members of the Akatsuki were now focused on a single target. The final hunt for Naruto Uzumaki had begun. A week later, an urgent message arrived in Konoha. It was from Jiraiya's spy network, a coded message from a deep cover agent in the land of hot water. Tsunade summoned Team 7 to her office. Her face was a grim mask. We have a lead, she said, her voice tight. A confirmed sighting of Itachi Uchiha and Kisame Hoshigaki. They're not hunting a tailed beast. They're traveling towards the border of the land of sound. Orochimaru's old territory, Kakashi murmured. But there's more, Tsunade continued. Our agent reports that Itachi is not well. He's been seen purchasing rare medical supplies. He's weakening. Sasuke's entire body went rigid. The news hit him like a physical blow. His brother. The object of his entire life's ambition. Weakened. Vulnerable. It's a trap, Naruto said instantly, his analytical mind cutting through the emotional haze. They know we have a new alliance with Kumo, that we have intel on their members. They know Sasuke is your brother, he said, looking at Itachi's brother. They's using him as bait. To draw you out. I know, Sasuke said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. His Sharingan blazed to life, the 3 tomoe spinning with a furious, desperate energy. And I'm going. Sasuke, don't be a fool. Sakura pleaded. It's not foolishness, Sasuke shot back, his gaze fixed on the map. It's an opportunity. A calculated risk. He is the one loose end I must tie up. I will not let this chance pass. Naruto looked at his friend, at the burning obsession in his eyes. He knew he couldn't stop him. He remembered his promise to Neji, his own need to settle a score. He understood. He stepped forward, placing a hand on Sasuke's shoulder. You're not going alone, he said, his voice calm and absolute. We started this as a team. We'll finish it as a team. Tsunade looked at the 4 of them, at Sasuke's burning resolve, at Naruto's unwavering loyalty, at Sakura's fierce concern, and at Kakashi's quiet, steadfast presence. She knew she couldn't stop them. Team 7 was a force of nature, and their path was now set. "This is not a Konoha mission," she said, her voice heavy. "This is a personal matter. If you are captured, the village will disavow you." "We understand," Kakashi said. Tsunade sighed, a long, weary sound. She looked at the son of the fourth Hokage, at the last Uchiha, at her own brilliant student, and at the man who had been their rock. "Go," she said softly. "And come back alive." As they left the tower, Naruto looked at Sasuke, a silent understanding passing between them. The hunt for the Akatsuki, the fate of the world, it all had to wait. First, they had to go and confront the ghosts of the past. The final battle between the Uchiha brothers was about to begin. The journey into the land of sound was a descent into a dead country. The landscape, once dotted with small villages and farming communities, was now scarred and empty, a testament to Orochimaru's scorched earth retreat. This was enemy territory, a land of ghosts and whispers, and Team 7 moved through it with the grim, silent efficiency of a special operations unit. Their formation was a fluid, predatory thing. Sasuke took the lead, his 3 Tomoe Sharingan a crimson beacon cutting through the gloom, not just seeing the path ahead but reading the very history of the terrain, the faint traces of chakra, the subtle disturbances in the earth, the lingering scent of ozone from a recent jutsu. Kakashi and Sakura flanked him, their senses on high alert, while Naruto took the rear, his own sage senses extending for miles in every direction, a living sensory net that felt for the faintest flicker of hostile chakra. "The trail is fresh," Sasuke's voice was a low murmur, barely disturbing the silence. "2 signatures. One is massive, like a raging sea. Kisame. The other. It's like a dying candle, flickering but incredibly potent. Itachi. He's not trying to hide his tracks," Kakashi observed. "This is more than a trap, it's an invitation. He's leading us somewhere specific," Naruto added, his eyes closed in concentration. "There's a convergence of chakra lines ahead. An old place. The energy there feels sad." The location, as they drew closer, became chillingly familiar to Sasuke. It was the Uchiha clan's old senbei shop, a remote outpost on the border that had served as a secret meeting place for the clan for generations. It was here that his father had first told him of the clan's pride, and here that Itachi had first shown him the cold, terrifying power of the Mangekyo Sharingan. It was a place of ghosts, and Itachi had chosen it as the stage for their final act. They made camp a mile from the outpost, hidden in a dense copse of ancient, twisted trees. The sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of blood and bruised purple. The air grew cold, thick with unspoken tension. "He's waiting," Sasuke said, staring at the distant silhouette of the outpost. "He knows we're here." Naruto sat beside him, not speaking, simply offering his presence. The rivalry that had defined their childhood had long since burned away, reforged by the fires of shared battles into something stronger, deeper. It was a bond of absolute, unconditional trust. "Why are you here, Naruto?" Sasuke asked, his voice quiet, his gaze still fixed on the horizon. "This is my fight. My burden." "Because you're my friend," Naruto replied simply, as if it were the most obvious fact in the world. "And because your burden is my burden. We started this as a team. We finish it that way. Besides," a small, grim smile touched his lips, "someone has to be there to drag you back to Konoha after you're done." Sasuke let out a short, humorless laugh. He looked at Naruto, at the unwavering loyalty in his friend's eyes, and the cold knot of loneliness in his own chest loosened, just a fraction. He was not alone in this. As darkness fell, a new chakra signature appeared on the edge of Naruto's senses. It was fast, powerful, and feline. "We have company," Naruto announced. A figure landed silently in the clearing before them. It was a woman with long blonde hair, her body wreathed in a controlled aura of blue-black flame. "Yugito ni, the Jinchuriki of the Two Tails. The Raikage sends his regards," she said, her voice a low, melodic purr. "And his assets." He felt that a debt was owed, and that the Akatsuki are a threat to all nations, not just Konoha. She looked from Naruto to Sasuke, her gaze lingering on Naruto for a moment with an unreadable expression. "I am here to assist." "Kisame Hoshigaki is with him," Kakashi informed her. "He is your target. His blade, Seimata, consumes chakra." "Then I shall give it indigestion," Yugito replied, a feral grin spreading across her face. The plan was simple, brutal, and direct. There would be no subterfuge, no complex tactics. This was a reckoning. Yugito would engage Kisame, keeping the powerhouse occupied. Kakashi and Sakura would provide support and handle any outside interference. And Naruto and Sasuke would walk through the front door and confront the ghost who had haunted their lives for so long. They moved as 5, a whirlwind of silent, deadly power. As they approached the old outpost, Kisame emerged, Seimata resting on his shoulder, a wide, shark-like grin on his face. Well, he chuckled. Look at all the little fishies, come to swim with a shark. Itachi-san said you would come. Your opponent is me, monster, Yugito growled, stepping forward, her body already beginning to transform, her hands becoming fiery claws. A Jinchuriki? For me? How delightful, Kisame laughed, his own chakra exploding to life. The two forces of nature clashed, their battle instantly escalating into a cataclysm of fire and water that tore the landscape apart. As their fight moved away, the remaining four reached the door of the senbei shop. Go, Kakashi said to his two students. Settle your history. Naruto and Sasuke stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of dust and old memories. And there, sitting at a low table in the center of the room as if waiting for tea, was Itachi Uchiha. He looked older, thinner, the lines of exhaustion and illness carved deep into his pale features. But his eyes, when he looked up, held the same cold, terrifying power of the Mangekyo Sharingan. You came, little brother, Itachi said, his voice a flat, emotionless whisper. And you brought your friend. How? Disappointing. It's over, Itachi, Sasuke snarled, his own Sharingan blazing to life. Your lies, your games. They end tonight. The battle was not a clash of jutsu. It was a war of illusions, a high-speed taijutsu battle fought in the spaces between heartbeats. Sasuke, with his perfected 3 Tomoe Sharingan, could see through Itachi's genjutsu, could predict his movements, could match him blow for blow. Naruto, in sage mode, was an anchor of reality, his senses immune to illusion, his frog kata creating invisible walls of force that countered Itachi's every attempt to separate the two of them. They were pressing him. For the first time in his life, Itachi Uchiha was on the defensive against his younger brother. You have grown strong, Itachi coughed, a trickle of blood appearing at the corner of his mouth. But you still lack hatred. I have something better, Sasuke shot back, his Chidori screaming to life. I have a reason. He charged, but Itachi was ready. Amaterasu. Black flames, said to be as hot as the sun, erupted from Itachi's eye, consuming the space where Sasuke had been. But Sasuke was already gone, having been pulled aside at the last possible second by one of Naruto's chakra arms. This ends now, Itachi whispered, his own eyes bleeding. Susanoo. A colossal, ethereal warrior of red chakra began to form around him, a skeletal ribcage giving way to a spectral samurai. Naruto, Sasuke yelled. Naruto didn't hesitate. He created 1,000 clones, and they all entered sage mode. Sage art, true 1,000-armed Rasengan. It was a jutsu of impossible scale, 1,000 sage-powered Rasengans combining into a single, sunbright vortex of destruction that slammed into Itachi's Nasen Susanoo. The impact shattered the ethereal warrior and sent Itachi flying back, crashing through the wall of the outpost. Sasuke appeared over his broken form, his Chidori blade humming, ready for the final blow. Do it, Sasuke, Itachi whispered, a strange, sad smile on his face. Fulfill your destiny. Avenge our clan. But before Sasuke could strike, Itachi's eyes widened. He looked past Sasuke, at something behind him. So, that was your plan all along, he whispered. A swirling vortex appeared in the air, and Tobi, the masked man, stepped through. Itachi, he said, his voice a distorted baritone. You have played your part well. But your role in this story is over. He reached for Itachi, but a blur of yellow and orange intercepted him. Naruto, moving with a speed that seemed to bend space itself, slammed a sage-powered Rasengan into Tobi's chest. And it passed right through him. Your attacks are meaningless against me, Tobi chuckled. I wasn't attacking you, Naruto said, his eyes narrowed. He could feel it now. The same dark, manipulative chakra he had sensed from Yagura. I was marking you. A small, almost invisible Fuinjutsu seal, the mark of the flying thunder god, now glowed faintly on the back of Tobi's cloak. It was a technique he had learned from Jiraiya scrolls, a final gift from his father. Tobi froze, a flicker of genuine shock in his single visible eye. He grabbed the dying Itachi and was pulled back into his vortex, vanishing without a trace. The battle was over. But the victory was a bitter ash in Sasuke's mouth. He stood in the ruins of his past, his chance for revenge stolen from him. He's gone, Sasuke whispered, his body trembling with a rage that had no target. No, he's not, Naruto said, his hand still outstretched, the faint glow of the flying thunder god seal on his palm. He can run. But now, I can follow. He looked at Sasuke, at his friend's shattered expression. The quest for revenge was over. The quest for the truth had just begun. And they would follow it together, wherever it led. The silence that descended upon the ruined Uchiha outpost was heavier than any stone. It was a silence filled with the ghosts of a stolen conclusion, a rage with no target, and a truth that was now more shrouded than ever. Sasuke stood trembling, not from exhaustion, but from the violent, impotent fury of a life's purpose being ripped away at the final moment. The Chidori in his hand sputtered and died, its cry of vengeance silenced. Naruto stood beside him, his hand still outstretched, the faint, intricate lines of the flying thunder god seal glowing on his palm before fading. He didn't offer words of comfort. There were none. Instead, he offered his presence, a silent, unwavering anchor in the storm of his friend's grief. The sound of crunching rubble announced the arrival of the rest of their team. Kakashi and Sakura appeared, their faces grim as they took in the scene, the shattered landscape, the lingering scent of Amaterasu's black fire, and Sasuke's broken stance. "He's gone?" Kakashi asked, his voice low. "Taken," Naruto answered, his eyes never leaving Sasuke. "By a man in an orange mask. Calls himself Tobi." Before they could process the new information, another figure landed in the clearing, moving with a fluid grace that was marred by a slight limp. Yugito Ni stood before them, her blonde hair matted with sweat and grime, her clothes torn, but her blue-black chakra still humming around her like a protective cloak. "Kisame has retreated," she announced, her voice tight with exertion. "He is a monster, but his blade is damaged. He will not be a threat for some time." She looked at the devastation around them, then at Sasuke's back. "It seems your battle was conclusive." "It was a farce," Sasuke bit out, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "A puppet show from beginning to end. Itachi. He was playing a part. He finally turned, his Sharingan blazing with a new, cold fire. The burning hatred was gone, replaced by a chilling, analytical intensity. The man, Tobi. He was intangible. Naruto's Rasengan passed right through him. But he was controlling Itachi, just as he controlled the Mizukage. He is the one. The pieces clicked into place for everyone. The man in the mask. The puppet master. The true leader of the Akatsuki. "Naruto," Kakashi said, his voice sharp with urgency. "You said you marked him." Naruto nodded, raising his hand again. The seal glowed faintly once more. "My father's jutsu. The Hiraishin. It creates a permanent spatial coordinate. No matter where he goes, no matter how he phases through space. I can follow." The implication was a thunderclap. They had lost Itachi, but they had gained something infinitely more valuable, a permanent leash on the enemy's king. The war had just been given a new, clear target. The journey back to Konoha was a somber, high-speed march. There was no talk of victory. The air was thick with the weight of new questions. Sasuke walked in a self-contained bubble of silence, his mind a whirlwind of deconstruction, replaying every word Itachi had spoken, every flicker of his eyes, searching for the truth hidden beneath a lifetime of lies. Yugito, having fulfilled her duty, chose to travel with them. The Raikage's orders were to assist, and the mission, she reasoned, was not over until the intelligence was delivered. During the long nights, as they made camp, she found herself drawn to Naruto's quiet strength. "You understood," she said one night, as they sat watching the fire, a comfortable distance from the others. "The loneliness of it. Being a Jinchuriki. We carry a weight no one else can," Naruto replied, looking into the flames. "It sets you apart. Makes people look at you with fear, or awe. But rarely like you're just you. And yet, you have them," she said, gesturing with her head towards Sasuke, Sakura, and Kakashi. "A team that looks at you as a comrade. It took a long time," Naruto admitted. "And a lot of work. But they're my precious people. I'd do anything for them." Yugito looked at him, at the simple, profound conviction in his words. She, a proud warrior of Kumo, had always seen her power as a burden to be controlled, a weapon to be wielded for her village. Naruto saw it as a tool to protect the people he loved. In his presence, she felt not the familiar resonance of a fellow weapon, but the warmth of a kindred spirit. A quiet, unexpected respect began to bloom. Their return to Konoha was met with an immediate, high-level summons. In the Hokage's war room, Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Hiruzen listened, their faces growing progressively darker as the team delivered their report. "Tobi," Jiraiya breathed, the name tasting like poison. "The man in the orange mask. My network has whispers of him, but nothing concrete. A ghost, a rumor. To think he was the true leader all along. And his ability," Tsunade said, her knuckles white as she gripped the table. "Intangibility. A space-time ninjutsu that makes him impervious to physical harm. He is, for all intents and purposes, invincible. No, he's not, Naruto said, stepping forward. All eyes turned to him. He has to materialize to attack, or to touch anything. That's his weakness. A split-second opening. He held up his hand, the Hiraishin seal glowing softly. And this is his prison. He can run, but he can no longer hide. I am his shadow. The strategic landscape of the entire world shifted in that moment. Konoha now held the ultimate trump card. They had a way to track, to pursue, to force a confrontation with a foe who had lived his entire life in the shadows. A new mission is required, Hiruzen said, his voice resonating with the wisdom of his years. We cannot launch a full-scale assault. We know nothing of his true motives, or the full extent of his power. This must be a counterintelligence operation. We must learn his secrets before we can strike. Sasuke, Tsunade said, her gaze softening as she looked at the young Uchiha. Your quest for revenge is over. What will you do now? Sasuke looked up, his Sharingan clear and focused, the fire of vengeance replaced by the cold, hard light of purpose. My brother was a liar, he said, his voice steady. He built my entire life on a foundation of lies. My new goal is not revenge. It is the truth. I will find out why my clan was massacred. I will learn what Itachi was trying to protect, or what he was trying to hide. And I will dismantle the system that created him, and Tobi. That is my reason now. He looked at Naruto, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. A heavy silence fell over the war room. Hiruzen Sarutobi took a long, slow drag from his pipe, the smoke curling around his weary features. He looked at the last Uchiha, at the boy who had been consumed by a hatred he himself had helped to create through his silence. He had kept the secret to protect the village, to protect Itachi's sacrifice, and to protect Sasuke from a truth he thought would break him. But he saw now that the lies had caused a deeper, more corrosive damage. Sasuke's new path, one of truth-seeking rather than vengeance, deserved to start on solid ground. The truth you seek, Sasuke, Hiruzen said, his voice heavy with the weight of decades, is a burden I have carried for too long. It is a dark chapter in this village's history. Perhaps it is time for it to be brought into the light. Everyone in the room tensed. Jiraiya and Tsunade looked at their old master, their expressions a mixture of shock and understanding. Your clan was not massacred out of simple hatred, Hiruzen began, his voice low and steady, each word carefully chosen. They were planning a coup d'état. The revelation landed like a physical blow. Sasuke's body went rigid, his Sharingan spinning wildly as he tried to process the impossible statement. It is a truth known only to a few, Hiruzen continued, his gaze distant. After the Nine Tails attack, the village leadership, spurred on by the paranoia of Danzo Shimura and the elders, grew to mistrust the Uchiha. They saw the Sharingan's power to control the beast as a threat. Your clan was moved to the outskirts of the village, isolated, watched, and stripped of its political power. That mistrust bred resentment, and that resentment festered into a plan to seize control of the village by force. He looked directly at Sasuke, his eyes filled with a deep, profound sadness. Itachi was a double agent. He fed information to me, trying desperately to find a peaceful solution. But Danzo saw only the threat. He gave Itachi an impossible choice, stand with his clan and watch Konoha be plunged into a bloody civil war that would leave us vulnerable to our enemies, a war that would kill countless innocents, including you. Or, he could eliminate the source of the coup himself, before it began. The truth was a blade, and it cut deeper than any Chidori. Itachi wasn't a traitor. He wasn't a monster. He was a patriot who had sacrificed his family, his name, his entire life, for the sake of the village. For the sake of his little brother. He chose the village, Sasuke whispered, his voice cracking, the cold fury in his eyes shattering, replaced by a storm of confusion, grief, and a new, terrible understanding. He chose to save me. He loved you more than anything, Sasuke, Hiruzen said softly. More than his clan, more than his own life. His one condition for carrying out the massacre was that I would protect you, that you would be allowed to live, to grow strong, ignorant of the terrible burden he carried. He sighed, the smoke from his pipe a mournful wisp. My greatest failure was in honoring that request too well. The silence, meant to protect you, only fed your hatred. The true villain of your story was never Itachi. It was the fear, the paranoia, and the political machinations of men like Danzo Shimura, who saw power and threat where they should have seen family. Sasuke stood there, the world remade around him. His entire life, his entire quest, had been a lie, a grand, tragic puppet show where his brother was the lead actor, forced to play the villain. His target was no longer a ghost. It was a system. It was Danzo. And the path to the truth was now clear. Then the objective is clear, Tsunade declared, her voice ringing with the authority of the Hokage. Team 7, your new long-term, S-rank mission is to uncover the truth behind the man known as Toby and the full conspiracy of the Akatsuki. You will be Konoha's Shadow Spear, the tip of our counterattack. Later that evening, the 4 members of Team 7 stood atop the Hokage monument, looking out over the village lights. The air was still, peaceful. So, Kakashi said, breaking the silence. The Uchiha Avenger and the world's #1 knuckle-headed ninja. Back together again. Sakura smiled, a real, genuine smile. It's good to have you both home. Sasuke looked at Naruto. The years of rivalry, of chasing his back, had led them here. Not to a final, bloody confrontation, but to a shared purpose, a new beginning forged in the ashes of the old. Naruto, he said, his voice quiet. Thank you. Naruto just grinned, clapping his friend on the shoulder. What are friends for? He looked out at the village, his village, and then up at the stars. The path ahead was dark, filled with monsters and lies. But he would not walk it alone. He had his team. He had his friends. And he had a promise to keep, to a brother, to a clan, and to a world teetering on the brink of darkness. The quest for revenge was over. The war for the truth had just begun. The weeks following their return were a period of deceptive calm. To the citizens of Konoha, life was returning to a state of hopeful normalcy under the firm but fair leadership of the 5th Hokage. The reconstruction was nearly complete, the alliance with the Mist was bearing economic fruit, and the presence of Kumo's Jinchuriki as a diplomatic guest signaled a new era of cooperation. But beneath the surface, in the shadows of the Hokage Tower and the quiet training grounds, a new kind of war had begun. Team 7 did not rest. Their S-rank mission to dismantle the Akatsuki network was not one of a frontal assault, but of quiet, relentless intelligence gathering. They became Konoha's Shadow Spear, and their first target was the rot within their own village. Sasuke, his quest for vengeance now reforged into a cold, burning need for justice, became a ghost in Konoha's archives. He had the truth, a bitter pill delivered by the 3rd Hokage himself. But the truth was not enough. He needed proof. With Tsunade's reluctant, high-level clearance, he descended into the deepest, most classified sections of the village's recorded history. He wasn't looking for whispers, he was looking for evidence. Redacted mission reports, budget discrepancies, transfer orders, anything that could build a concrete case against Danzo Shimura and the shadowy tendrils of his disbanded root organization. Naruto provided the key. He assigned 100 clones, masters of transformation and stealth, to the task. They became the librarians, the archivists, the janitors. They didn't steal scrolls, they simply ensured that when Sasuke needed a particular file, the usual bureaucratic barriers and security seals mysteriously failed to function. It was a silent, invisible infiltration of their own village's deepest secrets. The picture that emerged was a dark tapestry of unsanctioned missions, political assassinations, and a shadow budget that siphoned funds for decades. They found evidence of Danzo's hand in conflicts across the continent, always manipulating events from the shadows to benefit his own twisted vision of Konoha's strength. And at the heart of it all, they found a heavily redacted file titled Uchiha Pacification. Most of it was gone, burned from the records, but a single, surviving addendum, penned by Hiruzen Sarutobi himself, confirmed the truth. The order had been given by Danzo, under an emergency wartime provision that the 3rd Hokage had been powerless to stop at the time. Sasuke sat in the dusty silence of the archive, the single piece of parchment in his hand feeling heavier than any weapon. The truth did not bring him peace. It brought a cold, clarifying rage. His enemy had a name, a face, and he lived in the heart of their own village. While Sasuke hunted the ghosts of the past, Naruto and Yugito explored the present. Yugito, acting as Kumo's official envoy, became a frequent presence at the Konoha training grounds. Their initial interactions, born of a shared, lonely burden, blossomed into a unique and powerful partnership. They trained together, not as rivals, but as collaborators. They were the only 2 people on the continent who could truly understand the dialogue between a Jinchuriki and their tenant. They sparred, not with the intent to win, but to test the limits of their tailed beast transformations. Naruto, guided by his sage mode, helped Yugito achieve a greater harmony with Madatabi, showing her how to blend her own chakra with the beast's rather than simply trying to dominate it. In turn, Yugito's mastery of her tailed beast's elemental nature, the phantom-like blue-black flames, gave Naruto new insights into shape and nature manipulation beyond the Rasengan. You fight with it, Yugito observed one afternoon, as they sat atop the Hokage monument, watching the sunset. The 9 tails. I can feel the conflict within you. I made peace with Matatabi long ago. We are partners. The fox is stubborn, Naruto admitted, a wry smile on his face. He sees me as his jailer. But we have an understanding. A professional courtesy. Perhaps he needs more than a jailer, Yugito said softly, her gaze fixed on him. Perhaps he needs a friend. In that quiet moment, a new understanding passed between them. It was a bond forged in the shared fire of their existence, a respect that was slowly, tentatively, growing into something deeper. The first move against the Akatsuki came not from a spy, but from Naruto himself. He spent a week in deep meditation with Jiraiya, not learning a new jutsu, but refining an old one. He focused on the Hiraishin seal he had placed on Tobi, the permanent spatial marker that tethered him to his enemy. I can't just teleport to him, Naruto explained to Jiraiya. It's a blind jump. I'd be walking into the heart of their base alone. But the seal. It's a connection. A doorway. I don't have to walk through it. I just need to peek through the keyhole. Under Jiraiya's guidance, he learned to push a tiny, controlled amount of his sage chakra through the Hiraishin seal. It wasn't enough to transport him, but it was enough to create a momentary sensory link. The first time he tried it, the feedback was a dizzying, chaotic mess of distorted images and sounds. But he persisted, his analytical mind sorting through the noise, his clones running endless simulations to refine the technique. After a week of intense effort, he succeeded. He opened the keyhole. For a fraction of a second, his senses were transported across the world. He saw rain. A constant, unending downpour. He saw strange towers of metal and steel, pulsing with a strange, industrial chakra. He smelled the scent of wet metal and ozone. And he felt the presence of a massive, overwhelming chakra signature, a power so immense and divine it made the tailed beasts seem like animals. It was the Rinnegan. He pulled back, gasping, the sensory data flooding his mind. Amigakure, Jiraiya breathed, when Naruto described what he had seen. The village hidden in the rain. And those towers. That's the lair of the Akatsuki's leader, Pain. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Tobi was not the true leader. He was the puppet master, the manipulator in the shadows. But Pain, the man with the eyes of a god, was the figurehead, the king on the chessboard. And now, they knew where he lived. The intelligence was immediately brought before the war council. Infiltrating Amigakure is considered impossible, Shikaku Nara stated, his usual lazy demeanor gone, replaced by a sharp focus. The rain is a constant sensory net. Pain can detect any chakra signature that enters his territory. A direct assault is out of the question. We don't need a direct assault, Naruto said, stepping forward. We just need one person to get in. Someone who can move without a chakra signature. Someone who can become one with the natural energy of the world. All eyes turned to him. I can suppress my chakra completely in sage mode, Naruto explained. I can become a part of the landscape. The rain won't detect me. I can get inside. Alone? That's suicide. Tsunade protested. He won't be alone, Jiraiya countered, a grim smile on his face. I've been to Amigakure before. I know the layout. I know their weaknesses. I will go with him. We will be the infiltration team. A two-man cell of sages. And us? Sasuke's voice was a low, dangerous growl. He would not be left behind. You are the thunder, Naruto said, looking at his friend. Jiraiya-sensei and I are the lightning. We go in first, silent and fast. We gather the intel, we identify the target's weaknesses, and we find the source of Pain's power. When the time is right, when the storm is at its peak. I will use the Hiraishin to bring you all directly to us. You, Sakura, Kakashi-sensei, and Yugito-san. The full force of Team 7 and our allies, appearing in the heart of their fortress. That will be the killing blow. The plan was audacious, elegant, and breathtakingly dangerous. It was a strategy built on a foundation of absolute trust and unprecedented power. Tsunade looked around the room, at the faces of her most powerful shinobi. She saw no fear, only a grim, unwavering resolve. The fate of the world may rest on this mission, she said, her voice heavy. The risks are absolute. She looked at Naruto, at the boy who had become a man, at the hero who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. Your request is approved. Jiraiya, Naruto. You are Konoha's vanguard. Infiltrate Amigakure. Uncover Pain's secrets. And give us the opening we need to end this war. The mission was set. The Shadow War was about to become a direct confrontation. The two sages prepared to walk into the lion's den, to face a man who called himself a god, armed with nothing but their wits, their power, and the unbreakable bond of a master and a student. The storm was coming to the village hidden in the rain. The city of crying steel. The departure was a quiet affair, conducted under the cloak of a moonless night. There were no grand farewells at the gate, no tearful goodbyes. There was only the solemn quiet of the Hokage's office, the air thick with the scent of old paper and unspoken fears. Tsunade stood before them, her arms crossed, the Hokage's robes doing little to conceal the tension in her shoulders. "The intelligence you gather will determine the course of this war," she said, her voice a low, serious command. "But your lives are the priority. This is a reconnaissance mission, not a suicide run. Do not engage Pain directly unless you have no other choice. Your primary objective is to find the source of his power, the weakness in his jutsu. Am I understood?" Loud and clear, Granny Tsunade, Naruto said, his tone respectful, his usual boisterousness replaced by the calm focus of a Jonin on a critical mission. "Good," she grunted. She looked at Jiraiya, her oldest friend, her teammate. A universe of shared history passed between them in a single, heavy glance. "Don't do anything stupid, you old fool." Jiraiya just grinned, a flash of his old, carefree self. "Now, Haim, when have I ever done anything stupid?" Tsunade rolled her eyes, but a faint smile touched her lips. "Be safe," she said, the words carrying the weight of a lifetime. With a final nod, the two sages vanished in a flicker of movement, leaving the Hokage alone with the silence and the weight of the world. The journey to the border of the Land of Rain was a blur of silent, high-speed travel. They moved through the forests and mountains like ghosts, their conversation sparse, their minds focused on the monumental task ahead. It was during one of their brief, cold camps that Naruto finally broke the silence. "Pervy sage," he began, staring into the smokeless chakra flame they used for warmth. "The Rinnegan. You've seen it before, haven't you? The files in the library, the ones my clones found. They said it was the stuff of legend." The eyes of the Sage of Six Paths. Jiraiya's gaze grew distant, a shadow of old pain passing over his features. He didn't answer immediately, the silence stretching out, filled only by the crackle of the chakra flame. "Yes," he said finally, his voice heavy. "I've seen it once. In a boy. An orphan of the last war, in Amigakure. What happened to him?" Naruto pressed gently. "His name was Nagato," Jiraiya said softly. "He was a quiet, sensitive boy who had seen too much death. He and his two friends, Konan and Yahiko. They were just children trying to survive. They dreamed of peace, a peace without violence, without hatred. I saw a fire in them, the same fire I saw in your father." He looked at Naruto, a deep, weary sadness in his eyes. I thought Nagato might be the child of prophecy, the one the great elder Toad Sage spoke of, who would bring a great revolution to the world. I trained them. Taught them how to protect themselves. And then I left, believing they would use that power to build a better world." He shook his head. "To hear now that the leader of the Akatsuki, a man who calls himself Pain, wields those same eyes. I fear what the world has done to that boy. I fear what it has twisted him into." "So you think Pain is Nagato?" Naruto asked, the pieces clicking into place. "I don't know," Jiraiya admitted, and the honesty was more painful than any certainty. "But I have to find out. If it is him, then I have to face the result of my own failure." As they reached the border of Amigakure, the world changed. The lush forests of the Land of Fire gave way to a bleak, industrial landscape. The sky was a permanent, bruised gray, and a cold, steady rain began to fall. It wasn't natural rain, it was thick, heavy, and it hummed with a faint, constant pulse of chakra. "The sensory net," Jiraiya murmured, holding out his hand to feel the rain. "Every drop is a part of him. He feels everything that happens in this country." "Not everything," Naruto corrected. He sat down on a wet rock, closing his eyes. The world of sound and smell faded, replaced by the vibrant, humming symphony of natural energy. He drew it in, not with force, but with a practiced ease, a quiet harmony. The orange pigmentation flared around his eyes. "How does it feel, kid?" Jiraiya asked, watching him with a mixture of pride and curiosity. "It feels quiet," Naruto answered, his voice a distant echo. "The rain isn't just water. It's crying. The whole country is crying." He stood up, his movements fluid, silent. In sage mode, he was no longer a foreign entity. He was a part of the landscape, his chakra signature completely masked, blended into the natural energy of the world. "I'm going in. I'll be right behind you," Jiraiya said. He bit his thumb and slammed his hand on the ground. Summoning, Toad Gourd Prison. A small, unremarkable gourd appeared in his hand. With a puff of smoke, he was gone, having transported himself into the pocket dimension within the gourd, which then sank into the swampy earth, ready to be carried in by one of the native toads. It was a classic, high-level infiltration jutsu. Naruto took a step forward, and his feet didn't splash in the puddles. The chakra-infused rain simply flowed around him, accepting him as part of its sorrowful song. He moved through the outskirts of the village, a ghost in the downpour. The village hidden in the rain was a monument to industrial despair. Massive towers of dark metal and weeping steel clawed at the gray sky, connected by a web of pipes and bridges. The streets were empty, save for the constant, rhythmic drumming of the rain. There were no civilians, no merchants, no children playing. It was a city holding its breath, a fortress under the watchful eye of its god. Naruto found a perch high atop one of the towers, the metal cold and slick beneath his feet. He extended his senses, feeling the flow of chakra through the city. He could feel the pulse of the rain, the hum of the strange machinery, and something else. 6 distinct, powerful chakra signatures, moving through the city on precise, predictable patrol routes. They were all identical, all radiating the divine, overwhelming power of the Rinnegan. He relayed his findings back to Jiraiya, who had emerged from the shadows in a nearby alleyway. 6 of them? Jiraiya's voice was a shocked whisper, carried on the wind. All with the Rinnegan? That shouldn't be possible. They don't feel real, Naruto murmured back, his sage senses picking up a subtle discrepancy. Their chakra is immense, but it's hollow. Like they're puppets, being controlled from somewhere else. And there are black rods. Receivers. Embedded in their bodies. As he watched, one of the figures, a man with wild orange hair and a multitude of piercings, paused in the street below. He looked up, his gaze sweeping across the towers. For a heart-stopping second, his purple, ripple-patterned eyes seemed to lock directly onto Naruto's position. Naruto didn't flinch. He remained perfectly still, a part of the weeping steel, his chakra completely suppressed. The figure's gaze passed over him, detecting nothing. But it was the man's face that made Jiraiya's blood run cold. He watched through a small, long-range telescope, and his breath caught in his throat. No, Jiraiya whispered, his voice filled with a horrified disbelief. It can't be. What is it? Naruto asked. The face, Jiraiya stammered, his voice cracking with an old, forgotten grief. That man. The one with the piercings. It's Yahiko. My student. But he died years ago. The infiltration had just become a haunting. The ghost of Jiraiya's past had returned, wearing the eyes of a god and serving a new, terrible master. The mystery of pain had just deepened, and the 2 sages were now trapped in a city of ghosts, hunted by the memory of a fallen dream. The 6 paths of grief. The name hung in the rain-soaked air between them, a ghost-given form. Yahiko. Jiraiya's voice was a choked, broken thing. The legendary Sannin, the man who had faced down gods and demons, seemed to shrink, the weight of a 3-decade-old failure crashing down upon him. But he's dead. I saw the reports myself. He died creating the first Akatsuki, trying to bring peace to this wretched country. That's his body. Naruto's voice was a low, analytical hum, cutting through Jiraiya's grief with the precision of a scalpel. He was still in sage mode, his senses extended, seeing the world not as a collection of people and objects, but as a network of interconnected chakra. But it's not him. The chakra isn't his own. It's a vessel, pervy sage. A puppet. A puppet? Jiraiya repeated, his mind struggling to grasp the concept. But the Rinnegan is the source, Naruto confirmed. All 6 of them, they're connected. Their vision is linked. Their chakra flows from a single, remote source. They are the 6 paths of pain. 6 bodies, 1 will. He paused, his sage senses tracing the invisible threads of chakra that crisscross the city. And the one you're looking at, the Deva path. It's the central hub. The strongest. Jiraiya stared down at the figure of his dead student, now a walking god of destruction, and a cold, hard fury began to burn away the grief. He's desecrating him, he growled. Nagato. What has he done? He's using Yahiko's corpse as a weapon. He's using them all, Naruto corrected. Our mission was to find the weakness in his jutsu. We just found it. Pain isn't one person. He's a remote-controlled unit. If we can capture one of the paths, we can analyze the chakra receivers, trace the signal back to the source. We find the real Nagato, we end this. The objective snapped Jiraiya back into focus. The grief was still there, a cold stone in his gut, but the commander had returned. Capture one? Kid, they share their senses. The moment we engage one, all 6 will know our exact location and capabilities. Then we have to be faster than their reaction time, Naruto said, a grim smile touching his lips. And we have to be smarter. He looked down at the patrol routes of the six figures. They move on a predictable loop. They're arrogant. They don't believe anyone can touch them here. Which one is the weak link? Jiraiya asked, his mind already shifting to tactical analysis. The one heading towards the western industrial sector, Naruto answered instantly. The Naraka path. Its abilities are unknown, but its chakra output is the lowest of the six. It's our target. But it's flanked by the animal path, the summoner. We can't let it call for reinforcements. So, a two-pronged, high-speed assault, Jiraiya murmured, a plan already forming. Isolate and capture. It's risky as hell. It's what we do best, Naruto replied. They moved, two sages becoming one with the rain-slicked steel of the city. They flowed through the shadows of the massive pipes and industrial towers, their chakra signatures completely suppressed, ghosts in a city of ghosts. They found their target in a wide, empty plaza, the Naraka path, a large, powerfully built man, standing impassively in the rain. 100 yards away, the animal path, a younger man with a long ponytail, was just turning a corner. The window is 30 seconds, Naruto whispered, his voice carried on the wind. I'll handle the summoner. You take the target. No killing blows. We need him intact. Just like old times, kid, Jiraiya grinned, the thrill of a high-stakes mission momentarily overriding his sorrow. They struck. Jiraiya was a force of nature. He appeared before the Naraka path, not with a Rasengan, but with a sage art taijutsu strike. Frog kata, crushing palm. His hand didn't connect. The invisible aura of natural energy slammed into the path's chest, sending it flying backwards, its Akatsuki cloak ripping from the force. The path was incredibly durable, its puppet body absorbing most of the blow, but it was stunned, its connection to the other paths momentarily scrambled by the Senjutsu chakra. Simultaneously, Naruto appeared in front of the animal path. The summoner reacted instantly, his hands flying through a seal. Summoning jutsu. A colossal, multi-headed dog erupted into existence, its jaws snapping at Naruto. Too slow, Naruto said calmly. He didn't attack the dog. He created a dozen clones, who swarmed it, not with Rasengans, but with a complex, coordinated Fuinjutsu. Sage art, 4-pillar ceiling formation. The clones slammed their hands on the ground, and a web of glowing, intricate seals spread across the plaza, erupting into 4 massive pillars of light that trapped the giant dog in a powerful barrier. The animal path stared in shock, but before he could summon another beast, the real Naruto was on him. Sorry, Naruto said, tapping a single finger on the path's forehead. You're not invited to this party. A small, complex seal spiraled into existence on the path's skin, a modified version of the 5-element seal Jiraiya had once used on him. It didn't block his chakra, it just scrambled it, making complex jutsu like summoning impossible for a few crucial minutes. By the time the other 4 paths registered the attack and began to converge on their position, it was already over. Jiraiya had his target pinned under a massive toad, its body bound in sticky toad oil. Naruto stood over the neutralized animal path, his expression calm. Phase 1 complete, Naruto stated. Suddenly, the rain around them seemed to grow colder. The air grew heavy. From the highest tower in the city, a new figure descended, not with a jump, but on wings of pure, white paper. It was a woman with blue hair, her expression a mask of serene, sorrowful beauty. It was Konan. She landed softly in the plaza, the paper wings dissolving back into her cloak. She looked at the captured Naraka path, at the neutralized animal path, and then her gaze settled on Jiraiya. A flicker of a long-forgotten emotion passed through her eyes. Jiraiya-sensei, she said, her voice as soft and quiet as falling paper. You should not have come back. Konan, Jiraiya breathed, his heart aching. She was the same girl he had found starving in the ruins of a forgotten war, the girl he had taught to turn her pain into art. But the warmth, the hope in her eyes, was gone, replaced by a deep, chilling emptiness. What has he done to you? What has he done to you all? He has given us purpose, Konan replied, her voice devoid of emotion. He has shown us the true path to peace, a path you were too weak to walk. She raised her hand, and 1,000 sheets of paper swirled around her, each one hardening into a razor-sharp shuriken. And now, for your transgression, you will feel his divine pain. The angel of Amigakure had entered the fray, and the reconnaissance mission had just escalated into a battle for survival. You call this pain divine? Jiraiya shot back, his voice a low growl, the sorrow in his eyes hardening into righteous fury. Look at you, Konan. You were an artist, a creator. He's turned you into a weapon, twisted your dreams of peace into a justification for slaughter. Peace has a price, Konan stated, her voice as sharp and cold as the paper shuriken now orbiting her. A price you were never willing to pay. Pain will cleanse the world with suffering, so that true, lasting peace can finally take root. He is a savior, not a destroyer. That's the talk of a madman, Jiraiya roared. That is the talk of a god, Konan corrected him, and the paper shuriken shot forward, a blizzard of white death that filled the plaza. Pervy sage, the oil, Naruto yelled, already moving. He wasn't in sage mode anymore, having dropped it to conserve energy after the initial assault, but his mind was working at lightning speed. Her paper is vulnerable to liquid. It makes it clump, it can't separate for her attacks. Jiraiya didn't need to be told twice. He slammed his hand on the ground. Sage art, toad oil bomb. He spat a massive glob of thick, viscous oil, not at Konan, but into the air in front of her. The paper shuriken slammed into the oil, and their razor-sharp edges became useless, clumping together into a heavy, dripping mass that fell harmlessly to the ground. Konan's eyes widened slightly, her serene mask cracking with a flicker of surprise. Your jutsu is beautiful, Konan, Naruto said, his voice calm and analytical as he appeared beside Jiraiya. But it has a fundamental weakness. You're a paper ninja in a village where it's always raining. You must expend a constant amount of chakra just to keep your own body from dissolving. A sustained battle. You can't win. You're clever, Ninetales, Konan acknowledged, her body dissolving into a swirl of paper to avoid a lunge from Jiraiya's toad. She reformed on the other side of the plaza. But cleverness will not save you from a god. As if on cue, the remaining 4 paths of pain landed in the plaza, surrounding them. The Deva path, Yahiko's body, stood at the forefront, his Rinnegan eyes cold and impassive. The Asura path, a bizarre, multi-limbed puppet, whirred and clicked. The human path and the Preta path stood silently, their gazes empty. Sensei, the Deva path's voice was a calm, resonant monotone that echoed with a divine, chilling authority. Your lesson is over. Now, your judgment begins. Nagato, stop this. Jiraiya pleaded, his gaze fixed on the face of his other student. This isn't you. This isn't the peace Yahiko dreamed of. Yahiko's dream died with him, the Devapath stated. From his sacrifice, a new, perfect dream was born. My dream. My justice. He raised his hand. Almighty push. A wave of invisible, irresistible force erupted from him. The plaza floor buckled. The toad pinning the Naraka path was sent flying, dispelling in a puff of smoke. Jiraiya and Naruto were thrown back, skidding across the wet ground. The captured Naraka path was pulled to its feet, its connection to the network re-established. The tables had turned in an instant. Their captured prize was lost. Their 30-second window had closed. They were now surrounded, facing all 6 paths of pain and their angel. Kid, we have to go, Jiraiya grunted, pushing himself to his feet. The mission has changed. Survival is the new objective. No, Naruto said, his voice quiet but firm. He stood, entering sage mode in an instant, the orange pigmentation flaring around his eyes. Not yet. This is our only chance, Sensei. Our only chance to see what they can all do, right here, right now. If we run, we'll be fighting blind next time. Jiraiya looked at his student, at the calm, analytical fire in his eyes. The kid was right. This was a priceless intelligence-gathering opportunity, a chance to catalog the abilities of a god. You're insane, Jiraiya said, a wide, bloody grin spreading across his face. All right, kid. Let's get the data. I'll draw their fire. You analyze. Tell me what you see. Deva path controls gravity, Naruto began, his sage senses dissecting the flow of chakra. Asura path is a weapon, I feel gears and mechanisms. Preta path, the fat one. He's absorbing ninjutsu. The others? I don't know yet. Then let's make them show us, Jiraiya roared. He charged forward, not at one, but at the group. Sage art, Goemon, he spat a massive torrent of toad oil, which was ignited by a wind and fire jutsu from Fukasaku and Shima on his shoulders, creating a tidal wave of boiling, flaming oil. The Preta path stepped forward, its hands outstretched, and absorbed the entire S-rank jutsu without effort. The Asura path's arms opened up, revealing a barrage of chakra missiles that shot towards Jiraiya. The human path blurred forward, aiming for a close-range soul rip. Missiles at 12 o'clock, Naruto yelled. Soul Eater at your 6. Jiraiya moved, a blur of sage-enhanced motion, dodging the missiles while delivering a crushing frog kata strike to the human path. The battle was a chaotic, desperate dance. Jiraiya, with his immense power and experience, was a raging storm, forcing the paths to reveal their abilities. Naruto was the eye of the storm, a calm center of analysis, his clones creating diversions while his main body dissected every jutsu, every movement, feeding a constant stream of tactical data to his master. "We have what we need," Jiraiya yelled after a minute of furious, overwhelming combat. He was bleeding from a dozen minor wounds, but he was grinning. "They're puppets, and we know their tricks. Time to go." "My thoughts exactly," Naruto replied. He created a single shadow clone, which he sent flying towards the Deva path as a momentary distraction. The real Naruto slapped his hand onto Jiraiya's shoulder. "Hold on." The world dissolved in a flash of yellow. Pain's shared vision saw the clone charge, and the Deva path swatted it aside contemptuously. But in that split second, the two intruders had vanished. Not in a puff of smoke, but with a ripple in space itself. They were simply gone. Konoha landed beside the Deva path, her paper form reforming. "They escaped." "No," the Deva path said, his Rinnegan eyes scanning the empty plaza. "They did not escape. They retreated." He left a Hiraishin marker. "The Nine Tails. He has learned the fourth Hokage's jutsu." A flicker of something that might have been respect, or perhaps annoyance, passed through his impassive features. "They will be back. Let them run. The world will know pain soon enough." Miles away, on a rooftop on the outskirts of Amigakure, Naruto and Jiraiya collapsed, panting, the rain washing the grime from their faces. They had escaped, teleporting to a Hiraishin seal Naruto had discreetly placed on a high tower during their infiltration. They had failed to capture a path, but they had succeeded in their primary mission. They had confirmed the nature of Pain's power, his 6 bodies, the remote control, and the identity of at least one of the vessels. They had the intel. "That was," Jiraiya gasped, a laugh bubbling in his chest. "That was the most insane, brilliant, and reckless escape I've ever seen in my life. Setting up an escape route before the fight even began. Minato would be proud." Naruto just grinned, the tension finally leaving him. A good shinobi always has an exit strategy. They looked back at the city of crying steel, at the towering spires where a self-proclaimed god reigned. They had survived their first encounter. But they both knew this was just the beginning. They now had the enemy's schematics. The next time they met, it wouldn't be a reconnaissance mission. It would be a war. Alright guys, that's it for the video. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe. As always, the rest of the story is already out over on Patreon, link to that will be in the description. Anyways, until next time, peace.